So this is the study session. This is our third Monday of the month. We hold this open. We have a placeholder on this meeting night to use as needed, and tonight we feel we need it. So we're going to go over some board goals, some district goals, superintendent goals, and I just want to start off by saying a very special thank you to all of my teammates for getting us to this particular position, March 17th, 2014. And when I say teammates, I mean my fellow board members, as well as the district. I consider that we're all on the same team. We're all working towards the same goals. So when I use that word teammate, that is who I'm referring to. Tonight we're going to have Chris Lennox come and give us a report. Chris is the assistant superintendent. When he gets up to the microphone, he's going to let us know what it is he's going to share with us tonight.
Thank you, Chair Bergstrom, members of the board, Superintendent Fujitaki. Tonight, I'm happy to share any and all information with you about where we are at in the process of developing the school board committee, the advisory committee for the world's best workforce. As we're moving forward, there have been lots of questions about this. So as related to your goals, I don't have a formal presentation, but more as a resource to talk about where we are and what's been happening. So sometime back, we gave you a presentation on world's best workforce as well as the integration plan. We told you then our time was going to be really focused on creating that integration plan, which will be coming to you, I believe, on the 24th for your approval, so that we can submit that to Minnesota Department of Education. It's a little bit in reverse because legislatively we are required to have that plan in prior to the writing or official submission of anything for world's best workforce, and yet integration must be a subset of the world's best workforce. So we've focused our time and energy heavily on making sure we have that plan ready to come forward, and are really at a point now where we're turning our attention to the broader and larger plan of world's best workforce. And again, I'll probably start talking as we go forward about pathways, which in Bloomington is really how we're achieving the world's best workforce. So the committee, though, as we move forward, originally we had thought about that as being a smaller representative group. The more we talked about what needed to happen, which really was to engage community members, staff members, parents, business leaders, we just didn't think there was a number. The committee would have literally left someone off at some point without going out first to solicit feedback. So our thinking on that really has changed for this year. And what we intend to do is to go out this spring, and we are meeting, you met Christine Robleski from Teamworks. Eric Melby, Tom Holton, myself, Rick Kaufman are meeting with Christine this Thursday to even start putting some of that, what will it look like in terms of meetings and schedules, and how can we get some of this, solicit this feedback this spring to start planning and strategizing. So you're going to get more information as a board in short order. But our intention is to go out and engage as many different groups as we possibly can yet this spring to solicit feedback. In individual conversations with some of you, some people said, well, there are folks out there waiting to be heard. We need to go find them and ask. We agree, which is why we've slowed down on naming a committee. We fully anticipate finding some people who may rise to the surface in some of those meetings, and we may ask them and say, would you be willing to serve on this committee, and use them as we move forward as part of that larger committee. Again, I think the last time I was in front of you, we see that eventually being a 40-plus member committee. Obviously, there would be some ties back to some existing district committees that some will still be legislated, special education committee, community education committee. There'll be some that we have to have, and we'll obviously want representation flowing and communication flowing back and forth. But in large part, after this spring, when we collect as much of this information as we can, we'll deliver it back to the board. We'll integrate that into the plan itself, addressing areas or goals that we want to focus on moving forward. And then each year, we intend to hold at least one, if not two summits. So we would bring the committee together, for example, in the fall, to talk about how our how did we do last year? Talk through that, and then look at setting goals moving forward. What is our focus for the upcoming year? We also, right now, would encourage the board to call a mid-year meeting, just to look at progress. How are we doing? So sometime mid-year to call a summit, a second meeting during the year. Again, that's much more than what's being asked for by the legislation. We just think it's best practice. And so if we have this group, we continue to engage them with summits a couple times a year. We look at our data, we look at our performance, monitor and adjust, set goals, review performance, and then it becomes a cyclical type of process each year where that would continue to happen. But this spring specifically, we just think it's imperative that we get out and we share information about World's Best Workforce, our pathways, and solicit feedback from all constituents that we can yet from the community. So that's kind of where we're at with this. More information to come as we start planning those meetings. Administratively, we would be happy to facilitate. So board members, a couple of people asked, well, what would our role be in terms of those meetings? We would encourage you to be present, but we would also not ask you to facilitate. It's difficult to facilitate or be trying to answer questions and hear what's being said. So we would set those meetings up, you'd call them, but administratively, we would facilitate, make sure people know that you're in the room, and that you're listening, we're all gathering feedback, listening to feedback, because this is an advisory committee to you. And each group may have some specific things that they have as areas of interest, areas that they want to support, or areas of concern. And so we want you to have the ability, not be taking notes, not having to try to answer people's question on the spot, but we would really facilitate the gathering of all that information for you and then package it all up. But you would have the opportunity to sit in any or all of those meetings to gather that information and right along with us. So hopefully that kind of sets the stage for what we're thinking about this spring.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah,
Yeah.
Nellie.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you because, you know, we've been talking a little bit about that and kind of have an idea of what, you know, kind of process you've been following during the past couple months. So thank you for being open to other ideas,
You're
which
welcome.
is really important. And just want to start by requesting that you just for helping us to refresh our memory, what is the purpose of the advisory committee according to the World's Best Workforce?
So one of the things, and I don't have the legislation in front of me tonight, but the concept, what they're looking for is feedback from the community. So for us, when we're looking at pathways to graduation as meeting those needs, what we want to be able to do, if you remember, this is taking the place of the old annual report in progress. So how are we functioning as a school? What are our goals? How are we doing? And being able to report out on that and then solicit feedback from our constituents, mainly parents, community business. How are we doing? So are we making progress? How are our kids performing? And to engage families, specifically parents, because they would like to see that being the majority of the feedback coming to us. How is your child doing on their pathway here in Stillwater? Are you getting your needs met? Are we fulfilling our end of the bargain, if you will, in terms of making sure that they're successfully making their way through that? So we would take feedback from constituents about how we're doing and then monitor and adjust our performance. You know, a great example might be last year when the American Indian group came out and we think we could use some help in math. And we looked at that and we said, okay, great, how do we do that? And we monitored and adjusted and created conditions so that it's going much better. They're feeling good about that as we move forward. That could be happening, you know, with any group as we work through our system. And we want to look, the other thing that's shifting, I think, is the philosophy that we're really looking at all kids. That's what our mission says, but I think this new process is going to really encourage that. Arguably, people have said often it's the kids kind of in the middle that sometimes feel left out. We've got some things on the high end, we've got some things in the low. What about the student in the middle? This is really gonna force us to look at every kid. And in fact, the school board's focus, as you guys have said, we'd really like to see individual college and career plans for every child. Every means every, all means all, and so what will that look like? It should be different by student, but we're gonna have some work ahead of us to actually be able to achieve that goal.
Okay, I have another question then. So if we consider what the world's best workforce plan in what Minnesota Department of Education had said, that they have said the purpose of the advisory committee is, this certain purpose, this is the main goal for them to be here and there. So we're, as I hear you saying, you're talking about listening to them, but in any way, are they gonna be also participating in the decision-making somehow? Or are they gonna be mostly people who will be there to provide feedback, or we're not there yet? And then how different is this gonna be from the Curriculum Advisory Committee?
Okay, so I hear several questions there. First of all, this committee is really advisory to the school board. So the feedback that we'll bring back, if you think about what we're attempting to do this spring, is listen. So we're gonna bring you really an awful lot of feedback. We will be happy to facilitate and those conversations and pull it together and look at it, disaggregate it, and sort of say where are the things that are going really well that we're gonna wanna support and make sure that we keep doing, and where are the things that maybe we could get better at, and where do we get the biggest bang for the buck in that. And so talking through that and having you look at that, so some of that's feedback that will be coming back from the advisory, or all of the feedback this spring. Once the committee actually exists, their role in large part, I think, will be about looking at our performance and saying, how are we doing? And I'll use the American Indian example from a year ago. If we're not doing well, they should be calling that out. They should be saying, hey, your performance here isn't where we think it should be. What can we do about that? And we'd work with them to improve that. Also, if we're doing well, they should be pointing, hey, we're doing really well here. Let's make sure that we continue to support that and do nothing to harm a good program. So I think they would engage around results, around how we're actually doing. If there are pieces of that along the way that they may see that aren't solely academic, that might be another area. Because right now, a lot of our measures are academic in nature, heavy testing. So if we look at that, what are test results, which are important, but there may be other things in terms of the engagement, communication, family supports, other things that we would want to look at, how are kids being supported. So in that regard, I would see that they, as advisors, they would be bringing us their experiences, and we would want to do something with that. If it's going well, reinforce it. If it's not going well, make adjustments to make that experience better for them or their children. There was a second piece to that, curriculum. I don't expect any of our parents to be experts in curriculum. I do expect them to talk about their children's experience with our curriculum and how is that going for them. But we'll always need, as part of that district curriculum advisory committee, some people giving information, but you'll also have those folks who are gonna actually run the math curriculum adoption, or they will run the social studies curriculum adoption. So within that, there will probably be a need for some of both and. I think this committee can give feedback that we need to be listening to around their experience or engagement with our curriculum, but I don't think they will become a 40-member committee. Probably isn't gonna be our curriculum committee, if you will. Probably be a need for both. There will be a subcommittee, if you will, a connection to that. A little bit like special ed or community ed. There'll be representation, but I don't think they'll take over that sole role. I think we'll still need some of both.
Like,
Yeah, yes.
I'd like to add to that, Chris did an excellent job remembering what the law says about the committee.
Yep.
I'll just summarize it again. It's to ensure community engagement in the development and review of the plan. That's why we're going out this spring to get community engaged. We need to hear from the voice of the community about what our plans are for the development, not only of the plan, but also of the advisory committee. And Chris is leading that process along with a team of people. What's interesting is that the Department of Ed, even though there's a law saying this is what you need to do, they're not being prescriptive as far as a timeline.
No.
And they're asking us to be innovative in the way we approach this. So that's what we're doing. We're actually developing a process that's different than what's been suggested by the MD, but they're saying that's perfectly fine for you to do that. The other thing Chris has referenced and it started, and that's important, is the integration plan. We are in the second year of a 3-year plan, but because the legislature said, no, you have to start all over again, we still have a year left in plans. But before we go out and put together a new 3-year plan, Chris and his team hopes to hear from the community about this plan when we put it together, about how we should do integration, what the community wants to see in an integration plan. So that's going to be the work this spring. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of listening, a lot of seeking advice on what they want. The second thing is that the MDE, the law says about the committee, it needs to reflect the diversity of the district and its school sites. And that's why Chris is talking about having all these sessions, some of them school-based, some not, some with affinity groups, just to get a flavor of the whole community, and hopefully we can pull and assemble an advisory committee that's reflective of the community and of our district sites. The last thing is the advisory committee is supposed to make recommendations to the school board regarding rigorous academic standards, student achievement goals, and measures. That's part of the success measures that we need to all work together on. So all that's in front of us as far as building up. But then again, we need to seek community advice on this. So this first step that Chris is talking about is critical, that we do it right, and we do it well, and the board's engaged.
Great, thank you. And does anyone else have questions? Rick?
One of the other things that it says on there is the school board will hold an annual public meeting, and that's pretty vague. Is there any guidance of
That's what-
when? Starting this year, starting next year?
So starting next year, well, soon as we have our data, our assessment and achievement data, so the old annual report was October 1. So in that time frame, we think we should be ready and would want to call this first summit. And by then, and you guys may want to think about that, perhaps your, second meeting in September, you've named your committee. So then we call the summit, right, and then we have everybody together, but in that fall timeframe, because by then, we would have all of this spring, all of our feedback, we'll have our assessment results over the summer, everything should be ready for us to say, here's how we did last year, and here are our goals going forward, what do you think? And then we call our second summit probably sometime mid-year to say, how are we doing, what's your experience with your children, or, engaging our schools, and then monitor and adjust, it's going well, it's not, make any tweaks, and then start creating that each year, that cycle, because then we'll have our assessment data, we'll come back, we'll re-engage that committee in the fall, and each year do the goal, kind of look back and setting goals for the upcoming year.
Thanks.
Any other? Jim?
In thinking about this and rereading this again over the last few days and then going into our goals, our board goals, superintendent goals, and our strategic plan, I think this is timely to have this up front now, because some of the goals that we see, it talks about in the World's Best Workforce Plan to ensure student achievement goals are clearly defined, are measurable, have benchmarks, which are a lot of the things that we're doing now. But I think some of this direction that MDE is suggesting to us, telling us, are pretty much significant enough that we need to consider those as we're going forward with all the other goals too. Because if we come up with some other goals and wind up with a list of about 20 goals that we want to accomplish in the next year or two, I mean, that's quite a challenge.
Correct. And I will offer, you can take it for what it's worth, if our goal, if we believe the strategic plan comes to life through pathways to graduation, then, and I'm not promising you this is next fall, okay? Let me be very clear, we're not ready to do that. But if every kid had a plan, that would get at a lot of what Jim's talking about, because we'd have to know they're on track, both academically, socially, emotionally. I mean, what are those measures that we're gonna put in place for every child? And if you could look at your graphic and say, yeah, our kids are on path to be successful to whatever career they choose, no matter what age they are, that would be rather significant undertaking. There'd be a lot of work behind that to pull that off, which is our vision.
Any others? Yeah, Don.
I just have a question. In your organization that you have laid out, more than one community meeting right now to start with, various community meetings, and we're invited to attend them. And you said something about then people will be asked to join the advisory committee after those?
Yep.
I just want to clarify, but we're the ones doing the asking?
You will,
Just wanna
and
make
so
sure.
that's what we said
Okay.
way back at the beginning. Remember, I didn't expect you to get on the phone and start calling people. It's good we didn't, because I think we've rethought that now. But through those committee, or those meetings, community meetings that we have, there may be people that rise to the surface, express interest.
Okay.
One of the opportunities, I think, as a district we have here, in any organization, you tend to go back to those who've been engaged before, and that you just keep tapping that same group. This may be an opportunity for us to find additional people who want to step up and are interested in being message carriers, both to us as an organization and back to the community. And it'd be great to add, develop leadership capacity of more people in our community. So we look forward to adding new folks.
I think it'd be really important for us to remember, I mean, I know that we want to listen to the parent voice, but I think the other voice is just community members in general. We want to make sure that they're part of it, and if we hold our, these community engagement things all at different elementaries, we're going to get, or different schools, we're going to get more parents than anything, and we want to make sure that they're included, because if you look at the group that worked on the referendum, there's a lot of people working for this district that do not have kids in the district anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're really important to include them, too.
Well, and to your point, Don, if you think about the engagement that happens around a referendum, this would be very similar. The difference is there's no vote, there's no ask, but there's a lot of information gathered and shared. So all of those groups, it would be wonderful to be able to engage.
Well, I went to the presentation for MDE on World's Best Workforce, and if I quoted him correctly, what he said as part of this engagement plan is, he said, it's to engage your community in the work of educating your students. And so that does kind of, bring in everybody.
Yeah, Superintendent.
Another point is, the larger the committee that that the board puts together, the more challenging it will be to organize a meeting, frequency, communicating with the committee. So that's why Chris talked about being very careful about the other working committees that we currently have, because right now it's practical, they're smaller, they're more mobile, they're more nimble. If we have this big committee, depending on what size this committee ends up being, it could serve a different purpose. In other words, not doing the work, but sort of giving advice and feedback to the board.
Tom?
So how are we going to decide who gets on the committee? I mean, say we're at one of these community engagement meetings, and if I see someone that I think would be great, do I just go up and say, I want you on the committee, and they say yes, and then they're on, or?
Rock, paper, scissors. But what we'll do is I think what'll happen is that we'll bring names back to you as a board, because administratively, we can offer, here's people that have expressed interest, here's, names that have come up. But at the end of the day, you're going to want to have a committee that's well represented, and it's your committee. So There may want to have some conversation about how you'd want to get to a final list. But I think some of the things in law are, you want diversity represented, you want, parents on the committee, you're gonna want maybe some business leaders or some community members. So, there's no hard and fast way of here's how we're predetermining who's on or not. We'll really find that interest level and then bring names back and talk with you. So you've got some time to think about how you might want to do that, but there's no formula in place right now to determine who makes it or doesn't.
Yes, Superintendent?
Sectors, dividing up by sectors such as parents, businesses, institutions, could be one way. The challenge will be organizing the committee. How do they make decisions? How do they move along? Who facilitates the meeting? All those things needs to be processed by the board. The frequency of meetings. There's a lot of work to be done.
So are we gonna then have like a study session and kind of hammer all this out, probably in April or something, you would,
Yeah,
We'll get-
we will start, this Thursday, we're actually gonna start trying to pull some of the logistics together. And then as we have that information, we'll continue to try to share that with you. In short order, we ought to be able to bring you some thoughts about how we'll start collecting the feedback. And then along with that, maybe how we could put together a representative committee. And give you some things to at least consider among yourselves. In the end, it'll be discussed among yourselves, right? I mean, here's some ideas, here's some thoughts. At the end of the day, it will be your choice as to how you want to do that.
And we're looking at one plan, everyone. Pathways to graduation will be our plan. The world's best workforce and integration plan will be our pathway to graduation plan. And that's what we're gonna call it. And I think it's gonna avoid confusion. It's much easier to say too than the world's best workforce, I think. So the goal is one plan, and that's what the Department of Ed wants to see, one plan.
And Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
and Chris, and I think the other thing too, when we're setting up the parameters for this committee, how long is the committee assignment going to be? A year, 2 years? And then the other emphasis is that it's definitely a commitment. And when we've had some committees, big committees in the past, some people attended 1, 2, or 3 out of 8, so we need a commitment so that they're continually involved in the process. And so however long the committee is going to be, the duration of the committee assignment.
Is that something that you would want the board to decide, to set the times for the meetings? So kind of tag on to your comments, Jim. If you identify somebody when you're out talking to the general public and they step forward, they seem like they'd be willing to participate, but, they have a commitment during the day from 4 to 7. So that precludes them from coming to a third of the meetings. Is there a time frame that you might be telling the public? Or is that something you're asking us to set as well?
So our current thinking on that, if this committee is as large as we're thinking, 40 plus, we were really thinking the 2 big summits, right? I mean, so that isn't a lot of days commitments, but if you can't make it on one or both of the days, so as a board, you'd want to set which days you're going to have your summits, at what time, at what location, for what length of time, and that's really up to you. But the question about letting people know in advance, I strongly support. If you were going to ask me, or I was going to ask you to participate, you'd want to know how often, how many meetings, how long will these meet? Are these Saturday all-day meetings? Is this an hour? What am I signing myself up for here, even if it is only a couple times a year? And of course, it's your advisory committee. Remember, at any point, you could set to and say that's not enough, and call an ad hoc meeting and say, we want to pull the committee together. That you have the ability to do that.
Okay, Don, did
No,
you have?
I think I've got
Okay.
an answer there. I was just gonna suggest that we're gonna have to do some guidelines of our own for that. That would be our job, the school board also.
Right.
Is guidelines for membership and guidelines for missing meetings and, because, let's say you plan 3 meetings, just to and you don't want somebody that only comes to one if you got 5 other people that wanted that spot. You know, so I think we have to put together some guidelines to say, you know, if you want to be on this, this is the expectations.
Sounds reasonable. Nellie, you had a question?
Yeah, before you go, I just want to highlight 2 important things that I hear you saying tonight. And the first one is the fact that we're going to be providing more opportunities for people to participate. So that's very reflective of the job, the community involvement and engagement job that the board wants to accomplish. And the other one, when you talk about administrators not being part of the committee, but rather being more facilitators, which is another important point, because sometimes when we have members of the community in general, and we're sitting all together at a table, you know, board members or administrators, some people end up feeling uncomfortable or maybe intimidated, and then they end up not participating or not coming back. So that's another important point. Now, one very last question I have, as you mentioned before, that you're going to be working together with Christine
Yes.
from Team Words, and then you talk about it will be you, Christine, Tom Holton, Rick Kaufman,
Eric
and
Melby.
Eric, right?
And, yep,
Okay.
on this Thursday.
On this Thursday, okay, because I want to ask then, if we're looking at a community that is supposed to be diverse, right? Where, what would be the role of the Office of Educational Equity in the development of this committee?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're not gonna develop the committee. We are, the reason that group is pulling together, we were working with Christine and Teamworks on writing the integration plan. And honestly, more Dina and Eric than anybody else. But because Tom, Eric, and I really are responsible for the programming aspects
Okay.
that we've talked about, that's why we got pulled together. What we're going to do is say, okay, now that we've got our integration plan, you know, pretty well ready to move forward, how do we fit the umbrella of the pathways, the world's best workforce, and create the strategize and plan how we're gonna start collecting this feedback. So it's really this spring, what we're gonna start talking about on Thursdays, how do we start getting the information back? We won't be talking about how do you set the committee. We'll immediately, part of, I can already tell you, we're gonna start looking at, even like the Office of Educational Equity, what groups already exist? Who can we come visit with? What's already there? So the school sites are easy, but what else is there? What other community groups should we be going to? How do we collect this information? So it's really gonna be more about how do we gather information and feedback than it is about setting the committee at all. That information will come back to you to help figure that out. How do you want to do that? And to Superintendent Fujitaki's point, you could do that by constituent group, you could do it by, you know, sectors, you could, whatever you want to do. We could give you some thoughts on that, but at the end of the day, it won't be us picking that committee.
Yeah.
We're really gonna start planning how to solicit feedback. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, and I just remember that Office of Educational Equity also became part of Student Services, right?
Yes, yep,
Okay,
correct.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes, Superintendent.
Okay. Just received from the team the draft of the integration plan. I'm gonna review it tonight. Should get it tomorrow. When you read it, please keep in mind that the way this thing was assembled is that we would like to use the first year to get feedback from the board, from the community about what this plan should really look like going forward beyond next year. So when you look at it, you say, boy, this isn't much meat, where is all the things? We were basically continuing what we're currently doing now, with a few enhancements, but we'd like to hear from the community and from the board as we move forward in putting together the last 2 years of the plan. Does that make sense, everyone? So, and as Chris and the team put together the committees, what they're looking at is they're thinking about what kind of advice do they need as a team. The board should be thinking about the same thing. What kind of advice do you want from this advisory committee? And that would help you choose people for the committee. because these advisory committees are put together to advise the school board. And it'll come clear as you go along. When you read the plan, you'll see what kind of advice we need as we move along, right? And then we'll be talking to the public, these engagement groups, telling them, here's where we're heading, here's what we plan to do. They're gonna start giving us feedback on what they think about our pathways to graduation and all the work that we're planning to do. And then you'll hear all this, and then you'll say, boy, I need more advice on this topic. And that's what you look to get from the advisory group. All right? This is exciting. This is great stuff.
There, now I'm on. That's what I get for moving the microphone. Thank you very much, Chris, for filling us in. All right, so we're here tonight on St. Patrick's Day, where everybody's sporting some kind of green somewhere. We've got a green cookie, a green napkin, and after the meeting, well, I'm sure we'll all have green tongues. The main reason we're here tonight is to go through our goals. I had asked the school board to send in their goals. We're looking at board goals, we're looking at district goals, as well as superintendent goals. And so my homework this last week was to take all the goals and put them into one document, and I've put them together and shared them with my team members. But what I did for this document, for the folks of you that are here in the audience and listening in on TV, I simply cut and pasted. I made no attempt to edit anything. So consequently, the words that I misspelled remain misspelled. If I didn't punctuate the sentence right, it remained done incorrectly. The only thing that I did do was I added our initials at the end of the sentence, because they're cut and pasted and they're out of context. It shows who owns those statements. I also changed the font size, so it's all the same font size. And I need to say thank you to our 8th grade son for helping me, give me a crash course on how to cut and paste. So he helped me out a lot. So I've paired these goals into 5 different categories. And if you see a goal of yours that I put into a category that you don't think fits in that category, that's part of what we're going to do tonight. The categories that I've chosen are plans, policies, community engagement, resource plans, and then superintendent. So I know just from reading them that there's a lot of overlap. It seems that quite a lot of us have a large interest in our community engagement. So that particular section had a lot of interest. I do also want to mention that we have this boardroom until 10:30 tonight. I'm pretty sure that it's 10:30. And then they come in, they shut the lights off, and they lock the door and kick us out. So my schedule is clear until 10:30. If anybody wants to, if you need to get up and use the restroom, get up and use the restroom. We're a little informal at our study sessions. I've asked for somebody to take notes, and Maureen stepped up. We have a couple different opportunities for notes. We have the great big giant sticky pads. We can rip those apart and paste them on the wall if we need. Maureen's going to do it the old-fashioned way by hand.
Before we jump into this, I was wondering, those that have been here a while, does anyone know when the last time board goals or superintendent goals were implemented? Are we currently working under any goals to speak of?
No. We had a discussion my first year, and I don't think we got past the discussion. So,
Does anyone know when people that have been here, was it 5 years, 6 years?
At least.
Yes, at least.
Okay. So those goals, we still operating under them, or
No.
were they met, were just discarded?
Mostly they're like one-year goals.
Okay.
Typically they were short-term, 1-year goals, and sometimes they were extended for another year. Those were board goals. The other ones, because he needs some
That's what I was
direction.
trying to get at. Do we have superintendent goals?
Yeah, we haven't seen what they were operating on before.
Do we have like a well-written job
superintendent goals.
description? And
I can answer that. There is a job description for the superintendent. There are superintendent goals that I drafted, but the board has not acted on. So I'm working on the goals that I developed. But it's,
For himself?
in the absence of board goals,
So these are 211?
I just have superintendent goals.
But they weren't
Approved by the board.
approved, so you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Nothing finalized. So this is,
This isn't an-
this is new ground. We're riding an icebreaker tonight. And my goal for this particular meeting is to
Well,
to
this was
sort of
cool.
pave a clear path towards finalizing goals, which is why I mentioned we have this room until 10:30. So that should be enough time to hammer out some pretty good goals. You guys are all much brighter than I, and so when I looked at your goals and the information you sent me, I know there's a lot that we have to choose from, we can pick from it. So, you also want to bear in mind that we can't have, I don't think it's prudent to have 72 different goals for a district to meet in 1 year. So if your goal isn't chosen, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that there isn't a program that already addresses what you're asking for. I know that the district has, I sent this along to the district, and they're studying this. They're looking to see if there's already procedures in place to handle what we're asking for. So if you don't get yours put on the final list, that's not the end of the world.
I think,
Also,
can I just
Yeah,
say
sure.
one thing? Along with that, I think the other thing is we have to remember that getting the new World's Best Workforce Pathways to Graduation plan that's been put on us by the legislature, that has to be completed in a timeline, has to be done. So the additional goals have to be outside of that. That has to be priority first, because we already have a deadline for it.
Yeah, but we don't need to develop those as goals because it's already mandated, so.
Right, but a lot of our goals fit within that. That's what,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So anything that doesn't fit within that, we might have to,
Revisit.
or limit the few that don't fit within it.
we'll make sure that the paring knife is sharp, but not so sharp that it cuts my thumb. So,
I just had a question, thinking back. I think one time before we did this, we had a computer that was taking in notes, and whether this was through the technology office or something like that, and it was putting them up on the big board. I mean, so as we were doing it, somebody was really adept, and I know it would be our
do we,
executive secretary, but I mean, that was one of the options that we'd had before, because then you could edit as you went along, somebody just being edited, but that was sophisticated.
we do have that opportunity, and Deb Bunkholt has set that up on this particular computer, so it would have to be, it has to be this computer. Yeah, there's a template that has goals on it, and if we found somebody that was so inclined to sit and type there, we could do it that way. So then it shows up here. I'm not sure, because I've never watched one of these sessions from home. I don't know how meaningful that particular board is for those that are watching at home. Heather and Joe, you guys can see, or are you?
On TV, you can't.
Okay, so,
It could be helpful for us, though,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
terms of being able to kind of see what we have, see what we put in place, or even just the post-its, the woodwork, but, either we have the technology.
okay,
We'll see as it goes along,
all right.
find it helpful.
Well, this is a work in process, and I don't have a hard and fast way of doing it, except to say that I hope to accomplish a lot this evening.
And by board decision, we could extend it past 10:30, couldn't we?
Yes, you could.
We could. We
Good
could.
idea,
Thanks for
Rick.
bringing that up, Ray.
Yeah.
If you have the votes.
Give the votes, that's it.
If by that time only you loosen your tie.
There you go.
That's okay. Rick is doing a good job of representing the image that we want to present. Okay, before we get going, does anyone have any questions at all? And along the way, please feel free to ask questions. that's what this is, it's a conversation. So I'm thinking, first of all, we're interested in, yes?
One thing, everyone, this is more, sort of like brainstorming, so if we can be positive, okay, on people and not to, how silly is this one, and, okay, so we should try to stay positive. Great, thank you.
One question.
Yeah,
So
Nellie?
we don't have to decide, right, tonight, make a final decision, or do we? Is that the goal? Is
That's,
that one of the goals?
I'd like that to be a goal, that we come to some conclusion. Otherwise, the conversation continues. I mean, it just kind of lingers. Now, if that's a sticking point, no, I mean, we're not going to vote on anything tonight.
It's a study session, so
Yeah.
the board needs to vote on it on another night.
Yeah, no, there's no votes in study sessions, if that's what you mean.
I know that.
But I'm just, I really think that we have a good opportunity. We've started a good dialogue. We've got some energy behind these goals, and I'd like to know that we can move past where we stopped in years past. So to answer your question, Tom, the 2 years and 3 months I've been on the board, we haven't gotten past this conversation. And so one of my personal goals is to make sure we get past that and get something written down. And there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good energy and effort in what I saw turned into me. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start and go in this order. I'd like to go with the district goals. I'd like to move into superintendent goals, and then I'd like to move into board goals. So if there's anything that that has to come to the end, perhaps it's our own individual board goals. Now, yes?
I'll give you feedback on it. Usually it works this way, the district and board goals should be the same, and superintendent goals should follow those goals, because my work should be to support and help the board achieve their goals.
Okay, that's a fair statement. Anyone want to move in? That, all right, we cut the last 45 minutes off of the discussion. Okay. Okay, so it's district/board goals, and do they align? We want to make sure that we're not asking the district to come up with a manned mission to Mars in the next 18 months and then have other goals in another direction for the superintendent. All right, so here we go. Maureen, you've got you got your notes, you got your pen sharpened. So to begin with, we're looking at plans. So everybody has a copy of the document that I collated and sent to you. First of all, just real quick, yeah.
Well, I just want to ask, does everybody have a copy of the goals from the board retreat? Kind of the notes that came out of, we kind of started this
Yes.
thing going, so.
They're in the meeting packets. If you go back and look at
Okay.
your meeting packets, you can
Because I
find
think
them.
that's a good place to start.
Meeting packet, do you have any idea?
Hmm?
Remember which meeting?
February.
They're
what
in
was
the
it?
meeting after the retreat,
22nd.
so whatever the date was after the
These
15th.
are dated March 11th, so.
Because we did them on the 15th, and then they were in the next meeting, I think, those notes.
We're on a roll, but
Well, my computer doesn't like me, so I'll have to
Yeah.
I
mine
couldn't
too.
sign mine either.
sign out and sign back in. So this is the fun part of study sessions that you don't really see with our slick board meetings.
What date was that? That was not the 10th.
Well, I've got them, they look like this.
Look on 224,
Oh,
I think they were the
224, was that it?
the meeting after the retreat, and then they say study session. Mine say study session 2,
Retreat report.
is that where it is? I thought it said in study, I don't know, I couldn't find them, they were in a funny, yeah. Go to study session and then retreat report.
okay.
Did you find them?
Yeah.
I know.
I had to log back in.
Mine is
Takes you out.
waking back up.
It's in a different format
No,
than
it-
the one that Maureen has.
This is one from
Oh, no.
T-Marks?
Yeah.
Click on that first one.
This would be a good opportunity for me to eat my green cookie.
What, Don, date was that, Don? 2/24?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the 224 one, and then there's a folder icon for study session. Mine was the top left. I don't know.
224, was it?
Same for everybody.
Go to, close up. Go in there.
Yeah.
And then go to,
You found it there?
wait, I'm sorry, I can't remember.
My computer's waking back up.
Close it.
You have to keep moving the mouse so it doesn't
Fall
take you
asleep,
out.
yes.
Yeah.
That was the main, I said, go to that one, then go to 224.
Oh, I was wondering where that
Okay,
came.
and then, but this is where it's weird, you gotta go to study session first, and then it's under that.
Retreat report?
Yeah. That's why you can't find
Oh,
it.
you found all that
It's
in
listed
30
under
seconds?
study session, not retreat report.
Get it?
Oh.
No, because I looked when I was writing the goals, it took me a while to find it.
No, where are the goals?
Okay. So with the goals that are written, that have to do, that are centered around the world's best workforce, we don't really need to have much discussion on that, because we have to do it anyway, correct?
Well, I think we need to discuss it and prioritize and figure out, and, because we can talk about how we're going to implement it,
Exactly.
because they don't give us a whole lot of guidance, like annual meeting. So what we could maybe say is, we need to hold an annual meeting on this date in October, or by such and such, or we could even say, we need to figure out when we're going to hold our annual meeting by such a date. That way, you know, if we don't know when in October or when in November we were going to do it, we can say, by July 15th, we need to set that date, so that way we sort of hold ourselves accountable and put it on the schedule of things to do. That way we make sure that it gets done, and that way in early September, we aren't sitting around saying, oh, shoot, we have to put together this meeting, well, when's everyone available? And we would already have it set, so. I mean, my suggestion would be is to take world's best workforce, since that seems to be the main thing. Look at all the stuff that we're gonna have to do for it this year, that we have to do, that we have to decide, and then just prioritize those and figure out how we're going to get them done. Cause there might be some things, as far as implementation goes, that we don't have to decide until next year. So that would be my suggestion, is we just go through here and see what everyone has, and then go through the MDE document, and see if there's things that are necessary, and then go with that.
And then also, might some of our goals that we've identified, you know, some objectives and everything else like that, be subsets of the main goal? You know, so if we
Yeah.
say we're going to establish the district advisory committee for the world's, that reflect the recommendations by MDE, you know, that's a good goal. And then we have all these other ones that talk about doing that. So I don't know, not necessarily
Yeah, so they're like
prescriptive,
tasks, right?
but-
So,
but-
yeah, so to me, I see the goal as implementing world's best workforce, because if all we did was put together an advisory committee, we wouldn't have actually achieved our goal. So the goal can't be the advisory committee, that has to be a task, right? That's a piece of the goal. In order to accomplish this big goal, we have all these small steps
Yeah.
that we have to take.
Yeah.
So I think that's what you're saying, right, is you
Yeah,
take
yeah.
your list of stuff to do and group those underneath,
Yeah.
single heading.
I think the other thing is we can set some goals and we can set some superintendent's goals, but until we see the actual world's best workforce plan finished, then we'll be tweaking the goals. That's kind of the way they have it set up. You tweak your goals every year, you look at the information,
Mhm,
and then you tweak them again to keep redoing it. So,
Well, we
And
can,
that's a good point. Is this going to be goals for 2014, 2013, 2014 school year, or is it going to be
these would,
2014, 2015 school year?
this is for the school year starting in the fall, so
14,
it's at
15.
14, 15.
And then they'll go through till the end of the school year, or they can be like 1 year, or how will we determine?
Well, yeah, that's for however we determine, yeah. You know, that there, you can work up a 3-year plan for the board. I'd like to start with, if I may, baby steps.
And then just a question for Chris too, then, because we've already got some things in place for the 2013, 2014 school year, the big committee, the makeup, the discussions and everything else like that, the timeline probably really wouldn't be until fall of 2014 when we would be kicking off the big stuff, right? So our goals would be 2014, 2015. Big goals are, even though we have some intermediate goals now that we're working on with the world's best workforce, plus some other smaller ones maybe.
yeah, we need some goals to get us to the fall, for our work from now till fall,
We
maybe.
need some goals to get us to the goals.
Yeah, to get us to the fall.
I like
Or
to-
a work plan at
I like
least.
to remind everyone, excuse me, but I like to remind everyone that the goal should be telling what you want, not how you want it done, what you want. Chris had a suggestion earlier that what administration is looking for is the board to respond to a suggestion that we develop a dynamic or individual personalized learning plan for each student. That is not the board telling administration, this is what we want, a dynamic personalized learning plan for each student. Administration will figure out how to get it done. And it's gonna, as Chris said, it's gonna take more than 1 year. But we need to start building a foundation now if that's what the board wants for each student. That's a lofty goal. It's even, that's a very lofty goal. But it's a takeoff on personalized, pathways to graduation, and it dovetails nicely into world's best workforce and the integration plan.
Thank you. I should mention the superintendent has graciously accepted the role of note taker.
Mr. Chair.
Volunteer from the audience.
See how many of us
Our
jump in
audience
and-
volunteer, yeah,
Sure,
Millie.
yeah. Well, you know, seems like our world is pretty much revolving around the world's best workforce anyway, and it's something that we have to start now. Even though this is gonna take time to be developed, we have to start now. So
Mhm.
I do agree with Superintendent when he says, you know, we need to focus on what it is that we would like to see happening, what it is that we want, and then the administration, you know, goes from there. Yeah, goals that start in the fall, that's true, but, you know, what would be the difference between waiting to implement those goals right there versus starting right now? And also, you know, do we need to set goals and say, okay, this is gonna be for only 1 year, or we're gonna leave it open for 2 years and then review it every year? Because obviously, there might be some changes.
Yes, definitely.
So
Th-
we
this
need
is
to
a-
determine that as well.
It's a working document, so, if,
Can
you
we
know,
just add to that by the end of the 15-16 school year? Which will give time to create for every student?
Yeah, so that'd be 2 school years worth.
I'd like to
School
make another
years.
suggestion, because you're going to go out to the community and ask for their advice and input. Coming up with some real definitive plans now may be premature. We should be just getting some very lofty goals and going out and seeking advice, or else we're gonna be out there saying, we already have the answer and this is what we're gonna do.
so in a certain respect, these goals need to,
Not be prescriptive.
It'd be, yeah,
Fairly vague.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, fairly vague, yeah.
One of the things that we should put on there is, there's 2 things that I noticed that we're required to do. That's have a public meeting and create the advisory committee. So those are 2 things that I think we could put in and say, we need to have those done by such and such time.
As prescribed by World's Best,
Describe.
yeah.
So say, we will hold the public meeting. So maybe, under the goals, it might not be part of the goal, but maybe part of the plan of implementing the goal that we have to do, and not as far as what the administration has to do, would be the establishing the committee and having the meeting. So, do we want to set a time for that, or do we want to set a deadline for ourselves, like by such date in this summer, we have to figure out what we're going to do? Set a goal for setting the goal?
I just wanted to say,
Yes.
I agree with Rick on that, and the fact that those are really things that we do have to kind of do the why of it, or the how of it, much more than, because that's what the law says. That is our job instead of the administration. So that is one area where we do have to figure out the details.
And if we put in a date for when we want the committee established, and we're asking the administration to help us with that, well, then now they have a guideline,
Yes.
like, well, if we're going to help, we need to assemble this,
Yep.
or we have to get our suggestions in by August, or whatever it's going to be.
Yep. Any other comments on that? Okay. Well, I like it so far. Look at that, we speak and it comes out right there on the monitor in front of us. It's magic.
It's like
Where is that goal?
program voice to type.
Where, are we gonna go through the goals?
Well, how would you like to do this? I'm thinking of just walking down this list, taking a quick look at them, seeing where they fit in respect to what the district is being asked to do with the world's best workforce.
Right, and I think it would be good to look at the list, because, everybody had something.
Sure, do you want to look at the list in regards to just world's best workforce first?
Well,
We can just cross those off the list, or do you want to go through every?
Well, if we start on the front with plans, that's the one that's up here. I don't mind reading them out, and then we can just quickly decide, is this something that the world's best workforce addresses, or are we gonna need to park this off to the side?
Well, I think many of them would fit under it, but I'm wondering, do we need broad, how can I say? Like, these goals of that the world's best workforce already have, if we use those broad goals, we could probably fit them all under them. If we used, like, they have all students meet school readiness goals, that's already in the world's best workforce plan. That's the things they outline for. So if we use those for the broad ones, and then we could just plug ours right underneath them. That might be easier, I don't know.
Okay.
They have, 5 things here that they list?
Okay, well,
I don't know, that's just a suggestion, whether people want to try it.
well, who wants to be in charge of seeing whether or not they plug into that template when I read these out?
We want me to read these first, and then you guys can decide? It's on this thing. It's the,
You read them, and I'll put them on the.
it's the third page of this. And see if they plug into.
That electronically.
So it's all students meet school readiness goals. All third grade students achieve grade level literacy. All third grade students achieve grade level literacy.
Just say reading by third grade.
There you go.
There you go.
I'm just reading off their plan. This is MDE's plan. It says, close the academic achievement gap among all racial and ethnic groups of students and between students living in poverty and their more privileged peers.
Say,
That's a long one.
That's
It's been all groups.
Yeah, in all groups.
Achievement gap, that's-
Like Chris
Get
puts
the
it.
rest.
Have all students graduate from high school, and have all students attain college and career preparedness.
Those are pretty general, aren't they? Have all students graduate from high school, but hey, wait, we're not supposed to talk about any of these, we're just supposed to.
Excuse me,
Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, is it okay if Chris participates in this conversation?
Absolutely,
Certainly.
Great, good, thank you.
please.
Thank you. Just a thought, as you're going back through the 5 areas of legislative expectations from World's Best Workforce, I'm going to just reference our infographic for Pathways to Graduation. You have all of those and more. And as far as administration is concerned, you've directed us to achieve that through your strategic plan. So we are going to make sure that happens already. It's a little bit like setting a goal of MCA testing. I understand we have to do it, but it's part of what we're going to be doing. You may want to think about or have Dr. Heisted bring back some specifics in terms of closing the gap or some of those things, but we intend to do all of that as we move forward. So that's where Superintendent Fujitaki is right. The big, hairy, audacious goal is if you say every student will achieve it, that's all of those measures and more that are already part of our pathways. So,
And what I wrote up on the board there is success measures need to be updated to align with that.
correct.
Everything needs to come into alignment, and that should be one of the goals. Is updating our success measures to align with the pathways, align with the world's best workforce goals, which are the same. But that's what the board should tell us, that's what you want. Administration needs to deliver that.
You've passed a resolution asking us to do that already.
Yep. I think it's in all our goals we sent. So we're just trying to figure out where to plug them into.
Yep. Thank you for clarifying that, Chris. This, just so you know, this is what we want, really. I'm just gonna ask if you could turn, there you go.
That's intentional.
I know.
Okay.
We're all mic'd here, so they wanna make sure they can hear us at home.
Yes.
Okay. These are reading glasses. They don't work for long distance
That's just excerpts.
graduation.
You need to change
Yeah.
Want to turn around all the time?
Then I gotta.
Show everyone.
That's what this is. Okay, do we want to run through all of these? Do we, all right.
It's working. Yeah, there's a lot of good ideas in there.
What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read through these, and you're gonna hear many things that already exist with reference to pathways to graduation, with world's best workforce, and anything that we can't find a way to fit in there, just raise a hand. So I'm gonna start with the plans. Determine parameters for establishment of a district advisory committee for the world's best workforce plan that are reflective of recommendations provided by MDE. The objectives of that are determine goals for the world's best workforce advisory committee in the school district, organize an advisory committee for world's best workforce that is reflective of our community, review objectives and goals for a DCAC, and determine the need to keep the existing committee. Another goal would be implement additional academic programs that help students of color achieve academic success and reduce achievement gap, working with the Office of Educational Equity. The objectives of that goal are to review current programs and services for ELL students, recruit staff that are representative of the student population we serve, recruit and train interpreters and translators within our community in order to provide accurate communication. If I'm going too fast, just let me know. Revisit Spanish immersion or dual school initiative. Implement first language classes for native speakers. An example would be Spanish for Spanish-speaking students. Another one is conduct tours or visits to various district departments to see how they function and fit in with overall district structure. This is not the same as study sessions where the public or the staff come and present to us. The board would actually go out into the community, into the schools. Review the big picture view of the facilities.
Excuse me, Dick,
Yeah.
you want to wait to go through them all, or would you like to have feedback now, or commentary now?
You know what,
Would you like to do that?
there's a lot. I'll break it into thirds, so we can, how about if we stop after review big picture view, which is the last one that I read.
Okay. Would you like comments now?
Yeah, please, and I don't expect you to remember them all. I'm more than happy to read them if you have a copy that's,
I do.
Good.
As far as the ELL work and the Spanish immersion, that category there, much of that will be covered in the integration plan that you'll be getting on Monday. No, tomorrow, the draft. So all that's covered in that report.
okay?
Okay, because I'm the author of those goals here, so I'm just gonna make a comment about that. So, like you said, Superintendent, would it be a good idea to just maybe look at the goal itself, but not the objectives, because the objectives are something that are gonna come in the integration plan, but still maybe look into academic programs that help students of color achieve academic success.
That
I mean,
is,
we're serving all students, I understand that, but within serving all students, should we maybe look at something specific too, since we do have a big gap right there?
I agree. What you'll find is that's one of the goals of the integration plan, is to do the goal that you have outlined here.
Okay,
And that's,
How to do these goals if we don't know what's in the plan?
I
In
know,
that
that's
integration plan.
right,
We can set the goal anyways.
Yeah,
We can set the goal anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then when they
yeah,
come back
and
with
then-
a plan,
without seeing the plan first.
We may have to
start
tweak them.
know.
Yeah.
because we just say, well, this is important to us, and it's good that it's also important to you. I mean, it's,
yeah.
And I think to capture a bigger thought than a lot of specifics identified, those can come as we go along, but just to capture the thought of the,
Yeah, I think this is important to get this.
now, for me, with that specific one, since we are trying to help all students, I would like our focus to switch from slicing the apple by color to slicing the apple by achievement. And so instead of saying help students of color, say help students who are not achieving. And I know we have the Office of Educational Equity, and that's sort of their goals, what they do. But it's hard to say, if being black isn't the problem, then that shouldn't be the reason why we're targeting you for help. If you're not being successful in math, that should be the reason why we're targeting you. Because, and say, I don't know, I'm making up the numbers off of what I remember, but if the graduation rate among white students was 85%, the graduation rate among black students is 75%, well, it's really only 25% of the students that we really would have to look at it. You wouldn't have to create a plan that addresses everybody to try to just get the 25%. And really, you'd only have to get 10% of those to close the gap. And so, I just want to make sure that our focus remains helping everybody.
Yep.
Versus trying to target specific ethnic groups. And I know everybody does that, but I would like to change the conversation.
Well, I totally agree with the fact that we have to focus on achievement, academic achievement for everybody. But there is one reality, and that reality does have to do with color, does have to do with race. So I'm sorry I have to say that. Because I'm not saying we're only gonna focus on a specific group. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna focus on everybody. But as we look at our programs, the programs that we're offering, including the engagement programs, we have to look at culture too. We need to look at all those kind of things. So sometimes it's good to look at all those fields in the middle of all this big picture as well.
Right, but would my kids achieve differently if they were a different race?
Well, that's another conversation we can have together, but yeah,
And so that's why I look at it that way, as I say, there might be problems that affect a certain population more than another population, but that can oftentimes be, not causal, but coincidental. It could be that if you live in a certain neighborhood that has less resources, you might achieve, your chances for success might be lower than someone else's. And the fact that you are also an immigrant isn't the reason why you aren't succeeding. It's because of resources or because of your race. And so, I don't know, in my experience of teaching kids, I never had a kid that couldn't learn how to play the guitar because they were Asian or Hispanic or white or whatever.
Well, everybody can learn.
Yeah, everybody can learn. And so that's why I don't want to target a certain, or that's why I am personally not comfortable targeting certain groups.
You know, and that's a condition that happens a lot. We've had that in bullying, harassment, and everything else like that. Once you start identifying every single group, you're still gonna leave out somebody. And that wasn't the intent of anti-bullying. It's just don't harass and don't do this to other people. So in the world's best workforce, it talks about closing the achievement gap among all racial and ethnic groups of students and between students living in poverty and their more privileged peers, as well as students receiving special education and those that are not. I mean, that gets pretty specific
That's
too.
pretty much everybody.
All we're saying is, hey, everybody should have the chance, and we
Right.
want academic success and achieve the achievement gap,
Yes, Superintendent?
regardless.
I think this conversation is great. I'd like to remind everyone that our reference point should be our strategic plan. And the key thing for us tonight would be strategic directions. The first strategic direction is maximize student achievement. It doesn't say just for some students, it's for all students. The pathways is a graphical interpretation of the strategic plan. And what our goal is the number one goal is create for every student a dynamic, personalized learning plan that leads to a college or career plan. So we will address all students' needs, just one group of students, all students. And that's what Chris is emphasizing to the principals, everybody on the team.
And then we'll get into those details when we touch the integration plan, right?
Exactly, right, because resources are provided to do a special emphasis there.
Exactly.
I think it's important to interject right here that I want everyone to understand that because we're having this conversation tonight, because my personal goal is that we will be able to fill this list up and give the district something to look at, it doesn't mean this conversation stops. Tonight is not the end of this conversation. This is a continuing conversation that we can and we should have for as long as we're members of this community. So I'm really glad and I'm happy and I'm proud of the board for having this conversation. But this isn't the end, so don't feel that if you don't get your voice heard or if you can't say what you want to say tonight, it's over. It isn't. This is how a conversation starts, and this is how it grows. So every bit is appreciated.
I guess, so for me, the last point I guess that I could make on this is, if it read, implement additional academic programs that help students achieve academic success and reduce achievement gaps, I'm perfectly fine with that.
All students?
Well,
Right
yeah,
before.
if we said, that help all students, or if we just said that help students, either way, I just don't wanna say that help, say specific groups
Okay, I'm okay with that.
achieve it, then I'm all in.
Yep.
Cause if you did the reverse, it wouldn't work.
Well, I think I wanted to be specific here by saying that working with OEE, just to target the specific needs. That was the reason why
Okay.
it was included.
All right, I'm making my eyes work really well here to read. Okay, so I'm going to pick up reading from after review big picture view of facilities. Are we okay with that? All right, any steps the district can take to provide learning support for families, helping their children get ready for K. 3 checkups or self-assessment sessions. It's April, July, October. These would be study sessions to be held on either the third Monday, which is, tonight is the third Monday, or on a Saturday. We can be flexible. That happened, the last two happen to be my comments, and I'm interested in getting back together as a board to ask ourselves in public, how are we doing? How do we think we as a board are doing? What do you need? Are you getting what you need? Are you learning? We have 3 brand-new board members who have 2 months and 3 weeks of experience on the board. We have 2 board members who have 2 years and 3 months. So are we getting what we need? We'll do a little self-assessment. As always, I'd like to see continued efforts towards better creative nutritional offerings in the lunchroom, helping to ensure teachers have the means to appropriately challenge each student's learning style. Adopt the district's World Best Workforce Plan and approve budget adjustments if needed. This includes the adoption of the new Achievement and Integration Plan that is to be embedded within the World's Best Workforce Plan. It's a mouthful. Establish District Advisory Committee. Review student achievement data and adopt adjustments made to our World's Best Workforce Plan based on student achievement results and input from District Advisory Committee. And in parentheses, there's fall 2014. And we'll do one more, and then I'll break for complete performance evaluation of the superintendent based on board agreed goals and criteria. So I'll stop there, Les and Chris, and if you want to gather your thoughts and comment.
I have a comment on the on the 3 checkup. To me, that's a board action plan.
Yeah.
That's not I think the goal is to establish and implement a board professional development plan. And how you do that is you do the 3 checkup self-assessments in April, July, and October.
Right, that's,
Yeah, just so everybody knows, I took all of what we submitted and lumped it all together. I know that some of this stuff isn't going to fit nicely.
This
One
is
of mine
just
was almost the same
brainstorming.
way, establishing it from a board professional development plan / evaluation,
Yep.
Yeah,
you know, to put that in there too, and then that would,
Professional development plan / evaluation?
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what the checkups and self-assessment would be, the self-evaluation.
Yeah, but
There-
just the
there-
word evaluation.
lots of similarities and a lot of overlap, and they didn't all, I used a great big giant shoehorn to fit them into these categories, so.
Mr. Chair, can I go back up one and say something like, review current and implemented it, and/or implement additional?
Yes.
Because we might not need new ones, maybe we got great ones, you know what I mean, or working plans, so.
I appreciate that perspective. That's, and you may even want to say something about proven academic programs, you know, that,
Okay.
work based on, research. But our teachers will be the first to tell you, not another thing for another thing's sake. Please know.
Yeah, right.
So if it works, great, but not just another.
Just not another, yeah,
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep, so thank you for that.
I think, can we somehow, what Chris is saying is all of the student supports we do, some evaluation of which ones are effective in there. If we can somehow put that in, is that?
Now's the time to get the language in there. And then, of course, this is a working document. We don't have to, again, we're not going to vote on this. We can't vote at study
Okay.
sessions anyways.
I was to say, you can call them learning academic supports, I don't know, whatever term you typically use.
that bottom reviewed student achievement data, that's part of what we're gonna do this fall with the World's Best Workforce, right?
It's supposed to be,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, it's one of our success measures.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Same with that first one, the steps the district can take to provide learning supports for families, that's part of our Ready for Pre-K.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Any steps that the district can take to provide
Yep.
learning supports, that's part of the pre-K part of the
Mhm.
World's Best Workforce. I
Mhm.
don't know that we're gonna get the lunch, the food changed this year.
It's okay, it's okay, I'll keep plugging away.
Well, maybe that could be part of the youth advisory committee, saying, well,
There you
Oh,
go.
it will be.
you can,
Yeah, though,
maybe we can have the students come and cook.
ooh, wow.
Develop healthy meals, wasn't there some school that was doing that for students once?
The very last one that you read, the complete performance evaluation superintendent based upon board agreed goals and criteria, should we set a date for that?
Well, that,
It has a date, it has a,
In the contract.
in his contract, it says
Yep.
we have to do it by a certain time,
Oh.
which we've never really done. We're
Should
gonna
we-
try this year.
So should the goal be to actually, complete the form?
do it on time.
Do it on time.
In a timely manner?
We are.
And then, is there also, heard mention that sometimes doing mid-year assessments are also beneficial. Do we do that? Have we done that? Have we thought about doing that?
For the superintendent.
Mid-year superintendent. I don't have a long history on the board, so, and I'd have to see if it's in the
Oh, what?
It's
contract.
not in his contract, it just says a
Oh.
yearly.
But about, you know, they say, because sometimes it's helpful, I know in my job, it's helpful to know halfway through, am I actually on track with what you think versus what I think I should be?
One of the reasons I want the board to have 3 self-assessments.
I think part of that is I don't know what was done before, so I assume that you have new members, we have to agree on not on new criteria or agree on how we're gonna do it. So we have to, as Rick said, we have to have a process in place to get that done sometime. Or we'll be, time to do it and we don't have agreed upon,
Well,
I mean, it could
I
come
did
by
send-
email, I don't,
Not
You know.
to get off topic here, but I did send out the email that gave
Okay.
you the form that we've
Okay.
used. It's the one from MSBA,
MSBA.
Right.
just so you could review it and see
Yep.
Yeah.
that when it comes time, you'll
yep,
be
you guys
familiar.
have your committee for that, right?
Right.
We do.
So,
And it's helpful to look that over just to see what, what you're gonna be
mhm.
grading the
That's good.
superintendent on.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, unless you have more comments, superintendent or assistant superintendent, I'll move on. So I'll pick up here, develop and implement world's best workforce plan complying with the statute and following MDE guidelines. There will be many goals and performance measures developed under this goal by the administration. I may have additional administration goals after we've seen the plan. So there's somebody that's thinking forward. Ongoing development of systems for assessment and tracking of student achievement and reporting of the data to the board.
I guess
Provide-
that kind of falls under our that's a different way of stating, creating a pathway for everybody, isn't it? That's the same thing, really.
Provide analysis of student supports that will help determine which supports are the most effective at raising student achievement.
I think that-
Continued efforts to recruit and retain high-quality staff. Explore program options at select schools to encourage broader enrollment. Let's see.
I couldn't
I think I'll go down through 5 here for those of you who have a copy of this, then I'll break.
go.
Create school board and superintendent goals for the current year and approve them by March 24th, 2014. So we just spoke about that. Formalize processing for creating school board and superintendent goals by first school board meeting in July. By formalizing the process for creating goals by midsummer, this gives us time to have goals in place for the 2014-2015 school year prior to its start. Formalize board self-assessment process by first school board meeting in September 2014. By having self-assessment in place by September, that gives us time to reflect on our performance and make adjustments by end of year. Adequately review superintendent performance and hold board and administration accountable for making adequate progress towards achieving set goals, ensuring we stay true to the district's strategic plan. And then I'll break there for any comments.
So what is meant by holding board members accountable? Making adequate progress?
We'd have to determine what exactly that meant.
Board and-
But I think, if we set these goals and then we blow them off, what happens? Nothing.
I don't know, what can we?
So we have to figure out what should we do? I mean, I don't know. Do we have a public reprimand of ourselves? I mean, I don't know what we would do. I'm just saying that we want to make sure that we set these and we take them seriously and that we figure out.
I just don't really know how we can hold accountable, because really, we're only accountable to the voters. That's the only people we're accountable to, so I mean, Are we gonna tell, well, Jim didn't meet his goal, so don't vote for Jim?
Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna hold the
That's
board members accountable.
I think that's part of, as Rick says, that's part of the
Yeah.
conversation of,
Well, you know, one of the
Kinda
things we
envision
could do is we could say, is we could put out literally a public letter saying, here's the goals we set, here's the ones that we didn't meet. And then we could say, here's why, and here's what we're going to do to resolve this for next year. Or, we didn't meet this because we decided to table it. And so it'd just be a public acknowledgement, at the very least, of saying, here's the goals we set that we didn't actually accomplish. And so, you know, you elected us to do a job, here's a job we thought we were supposed to do. We didn't meet our own expectations of what we thought we could get done. Here's what we're doing to resolve the situation.
We'd have to have
So it wouldn't be, we're going to,
We'd have to
Yes.
have a little time on that, since some of these goals are, you know, long-term, they're not gonna happen in a year.
you know, but we
You know.
could,
But I think
So
some of
you-
those, keeping this document, some of those would fall under the establish and implement a board professional development evaluation
Yes.
plan,
Yes.
well,
you know, and it puts some dates on it. And the same thing with a couple of those other ones can fit into the superintendent evaluation one too.
well, and some of them do, like,
Yeah.
some of them, like if we didn't evaluate superintendent, if we'd never actually set superintendent goals, if we didn't hold the public forum in September,
Right.
we could say, well, we said we were going to, we didn't, because we didn't have time. We didn't because we determined that it would actually be better to do it in January than in October.
Yeah.
We didn't because there was another crisis that took up time. And so I'm just saying, we should take a look at our goals and then hold ourselves accountable to actually doing it.
I think it's the
Well, I
same thing that
think
someone else said in the check-in, really. We're checking in to see where we are in a public meeting.
Well, I mean, it's hard to know what we are actually achieving until we see the results of the programs. So that's actually when even NDE will get to say, okay, they are actually
Right.
achieving right now.
I know the superintendent has a question here real quick.
If you look up there, I added this sentence here, Rick, if the board wants to be held accountable at the summit, you can report results of your goals to the public,
There's an opportunity for
There's an
public.
opportunity
whether they
there.
did it or not.
I think this will be a good opportunity for us to plan our SMART goals. I know the M in the acronym SMART means makeable. So I want to keep in mind that whatever goals we set for the district as well as ourselves, and we feel at least that we have an opportunity to make those.
Yeah, it's be attainable, definitely.
Yeah.
People unattainable.
Yeah.
Well, this will be a good opportunity to have a facilitator, good, right now,
Yeah,
working with us. This will be the time.
You know, Dick, I
Today.
like the way we're going, and we're picking out some of the high points. And then some of the other ones, we'll keep these, because as we review and go through these, then we can maybe wordsmith and figure out some of the dates, if the dates are really critical to a particular, an evaluation or something like that, then we can put them in.
Mhm. Well, we're making progress. I see the letters come on the screen in front of me, and I can still read some of them, so.
Now that, when I had said the self-assessment process, I had pushed it out into September just because I needed to come up with a date. It has nothing to do with anything, so, I mean, we can do it now, whatever.
Because you're date oriented, and it's nice to have that on it.
But
But at
that's
the
one
same
of the smart, I
time,
mean, the timing.
we do have the superintendent evaluation subcommittee will be meeting shortly. And so some of these things we can take from there and include in our evaluation process, which we will bring back to the board and talk about some of these other things too. So that's why this is helpful and good that we do this.
And then we may need to tweak these goals a little bit depending upon what happens in your committee too. I mean, we can work both ways on it.
Yeah, yeah.
What, two up there, the formalizing the process, once again, I just put in a date just because of the SMART goals, so you should have dates. But I just thought, if we set a time period, we could do it the same every year. So then we would just know,
Kind of a
in
work plan.
February, or in whatever month, that's when we typically do this process, instead of in March. You know, maybe if it's July for the upcoming school year. And so that was the purpose of putting in a date, was just to suggest maybe we make this a formal process where we just know on the calendar, this meeting in this month, every year is always.
That's when we do
dedicated
stuff.
for it.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's
Kind
gonna
of
have
sort
a
of like the organizational meeting in January, but if you have 4 new people, you might not want to go through all of this at the first meeting in January. So giving a few months, that's why I put it in the middle of the summer. Give it a few months, after you have some experience to do it.
Sure, well, that's one of the reasons we're having this meeting in March and not in early February or January.
But it needed to be done because we didn't have it yet, so.
It'd be nice to have a work plan in place.
We would change the date.
So I just have a question, since Rick is talking about doing it in the summer, and somewhere else someone put, so does that mean we're doing our first assessment in April, like in a month? Or does that mean next year's April?
Well,
We should clarify that.
That's-
Thinking next year's April.
Okay,
Well-
just wanted to make sure.
my,
I'll clarify that.
that was my comment, and
Okay.
my suggestion, those dates, those months
Okay.
are this year.
Okay.
So it'd be next month, and then 3 months later, and then 3 months later. And my thought for that particular meeting, it could take 15 minutes, or it could take 3.5 hours. But I'd like to set aside, we have a placeholder on the 3rd Monday of the month. It could be a Saturday if we plan far enough ahead, especially in the summer. I know that summer activities get busy on the weekends. What I'm envisioning with that particular scenario is just getting together and saying, how are we doing? Are you getting what you need? Don, Tom, Nellie, Rick, Maureen. What else do you need from me as a chair? Are you getting what you need from the district? It's an open, it's an honest communication, and we do it in public. When we go to work, there's a microphone stuck in our face and a camera on, and people are invited to come and watch. And I think that we need to do that. We need to do it in public. And so it's this is my vision of a board getting together and saying, what do we think we're doing? How can we do better? And if we're all good with what's going on, then we get to verbalize that, and we're done at 7:15.
Rick, does this capture your thought here, this sentence?
Yeah, that was the idea.
Okay.
And that would be, I guess that would start next year, because we're doing that now for this year. And it doesn't have to be July. I mean, we could maybe say in the spring, we want to set up for next year. And
Mhm.
that was just pick somewhere in the middle.
I have a suggestion. The advisory committee's gonna be meeting in the spring. At that time, I think some goal setting would be a good topic for discussion for the coming year.
So are you thinking June?
No.
Or May,
in
or-
spring, sometime in spring.
Okay.
So
When you meet with the advisory committee should have some input on the goals for the coming year.
What advisory committee, the WBSB or WBF, BFT?
Pathways to
That-
graduation.
Big one.
That was
Advisory
great
committee.
I agree.
That's a good way to do it.
PTP.
So I would say this thing should line up with the pathways, this thing here.
So spring is coming on the 21st, and that 20th, that is 3 days from now.
We won't meet before the snow melts. Only after. I did have a question for Rick, too, that I'm wondering why you hid number 4 from us. It goes 1, 2, 3,
You
5.
know what? I didn't number them. That was the number. Oh, you know what? That's
No.
probably on the next page.
Yeah, and number 4 fit into a different category.
Is that right?
There you go. It's over here under community engagement.
Remember, they were cut and pasted all over the place.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
It's a
I'm
Pay no
process.
attention to the numbers.
I'm
I can't help it. I'm
surprised
an
Word
accountant.
didn't automatically renumber that.
Yeah, only the accountants would ask that, right?
I think it tried to automatically renumber, but I told my son, don't edit anything. So,
Thank you. That's enough on that one.
yeah. Yeah, so I do know how to count, so does my son, but these were cut and pasted. All right, so I'll pick up reading from just under number 5, goal number 2. School board members will improve their understanding and knowledge of public education programs and processes of the district by participating in training, conferences, and other activities by June 2015 as assessed by self-evaluation. There's two objectives listed under that. School board members will participate in professional development opportunities by attending a minimum of 3 conferences, workshops, or other training opportunities in or outside of the district. Objective 2, school board members will meet with the superintendent and or his cabinet a minimum of 2 times and as needed to better understand the full scope of public education and the implementation process. And let's see. So I've split the page here. World's Best Workforce. Approve the WBW integration plan, target of the plan. Review policies related to WBW, World's Best Workforce, and integration. Create policies for the 5 primary measurements of World's Best Workforce Plan. Organize the Mega Community Committee. That's a mouthful. Hold public forum, effectively engage community. Alignment of district systems and structures to World's Best Workforce. Agree on district success measures at the district, school, and department levels. Establish what will be measured, parameter for vision, success measures. Review budget and establish parameters for World's Best Workforce and integration. Approve annual budget. Tight alignment to strategic plan. Personalized learning plans for every student. The board to utilize the guiding change document to describe the why, the what, and not the how. Pre-K programming and safety and security. And that wraps up the first category.
I was thinking, since we haven't really talked about World's Best Workforce yet, we should probably hit that first one.
This would be good. World's Best Workforce Plan. Superintendent, Chris, do you have any comments?
On the items you just covered?
Yes.
No.
Okay. They're all
I think
pretty,
I think we've covered many of those items already with what we have up there.
they're all pretty straightforward here. All right, any comments before I move on to policies, which is our next category?
We're gonna kind of like condense these into smaller, I mean, we're not gonna obviously have all of these goals.
No, we're not. But this particular document here is something that we can pare down as needed.
What did we say that goal 2 goes? Did we say? Or no?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Nellie.
Yeah,
Goal number 2?
yeah, we read through them. So that's part of our, what do we call it? Our school board
policies?
development plan.
Yes.
Yes.
Would that go into policies then? School board policies or like,
Well, I don't know that our development plan goes into a school board policy.
well, maybe if it has to do with conferences and workshops, part of that will have to fit into the policies too, right?
I think we can worry about the objectives of it after, but
I think those all fall under professional development,
Yeah.
though.
I'd agree.
Professional
Yeah.
development.
Yep.
So were you thinking that those would be, we will do these, or is it, here are some suggestions of things that you could do in order to achieve this goal?
Oh, no, I was writing if this is what we would do. To accomplish this goal, we would meet these objectives.
And, maybe at this time,
Those are suggestions
because
for
as
objectives.
I'm thinking for Maureen and Nellie and I, when we have the superintendent evaluation subcommittee meeting, there's a lot of stuff in here that we'll just extract out and use in our discussion about establishing the process, the matrix, and so on, even with our MSBA. I'm thinking the same thing about board goals. I don't know if we have a board subcommittee, board evaluation subcommittee. We don't, a lot of times it's the committee of the whole, but I mean, some of these things could be taken out and worked with a board evaluation / development subcommittee. Other than being the chair's
that's something we gotta
ultimate
work on.
responsibility.
That's a goal, to work on
Yeah,
figuring all that out.
I mean, do we need a subcommittee?
I have a suggestion. I think you may find it advantageous to bring a consultant to help you with that self-evaluation and professional development. We're a learning organization. We should bring a professional, instructor to help the board.
Yeah, there are some.
Continue with the next steps of the retreat.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Step 2.
all right.
Okay, so now we're on to policies. All right, the first one we've decided can go into a different category, but I'll read it anyways. Review school board policies and regulations for continuous support of the district's mission and vision. Or no, we have, revise board of directors policies and align them to MSBA guidelines and Minnesota statutes. Revise professional development for school board. Revise administration's policy for alignment with World Best Workforce as needed. Review the district's strategic plan on a regular basis in order to strengthen our principles and/or identify possible additions, changes. The objectives are revisit strategic plan every 2 or 3 years. Review foreign language instruction. Implement foreign language classes in elementary school for English native-speaking students. Review student handbook policies to be sure of updated concerns. Establish annual superintendent evaluation process to include goals and performance matrix.
Yeah, you can cross that out.
Establish annual board evaluation process to include goals and board development. Okay,
Yeah, you can cross it.
got them in there twice. And, let's see, policy work review and update as needed.
Yeah, you know, the one that, where you put the review foreign languages instruction, I don't think that's a policy. That goes within policies.
Which one?
Review foreign language instruction,
That'd be,
that's not part of the policies,
Yeah, that would be more.
right?
Yeah, where do you want to stick that one?
I don't know.
Again, this is just my interpretation of the 5 different categories I
Yeah, I
chose,
understand.
trying to
but
fit it in
then,
there.
Where do you think, Superintendent, if we wanted to review foreign language instructions, we're talking about curriculum here, instructions.
I think that should wait for, we have an EL plan that's already in action. I think that should be part of the English learner plan that Eric Melby's is already in place, and he updates that, reviews and updates that annually. That is an operational plan.
Right. Okay, this is for later.
Do we have a current guideline for reviewing the policy? We say every 2 years we review all of them, or is it we take chunks of it?
What's it take, like 3 to 5 years to go through the whole? Yeah.
If it's her.
And it is chunks.
I think we are on a, we already have a cycle going now, don't we? Yeah.
Yep, we're going to see those coming up soon.
Are we gonna need to look at our strategic plan in a certain number of years with this whole workforce thing happening?
The work that Chris is talking about, those summits, is an annual review of what we're doing with respect to our work with our strategic plan. Because the Pathways to Graduation work is our strategic plan. So we'll be reviewing it semi-annually. So that's where that takes place.
So would that be considered within policies then? Should we put that in
No,
policies?
I don't think
No.
that's in law. No, that's not in law. That's just a practice or we'll start. At least once a year, the law says once a year. We're gonna do it twice a year. My suggestion is up there. Are aligned and support. Need to be it could be better worded, but that's what I think needs to be done.
We may
That's
have,
what the board needs to, yes, go ahead.
I was just say, we may have to, on that, all relevant policies are aligned to support our pathways to graduation. We may have to take those in chunks, though. We may
Right,
not be able
yeah.
to do all of
It's a
them, so,
multi-year plan.
yeah, so that's,
The question for the board is, do you want to have a policy that commits you to update, doing this update? Because it's so easy just to go and say, nah, we have other things to do, and keep kicking it down the road. When you put it in policy,
Yeah.
you tell future generations, this is what we want. We want the board to, every so many years, go through the whole thing. We have 100 policies. That's the question. The boards have never addressed this. So there was a period when we went 25 years without updating our policies. And many districts do that because they don't put it down and say, this is what we need to do from a policy point of view. So future generations know that this is the, and if the next generation wants to change it, they can vote to change the policy. That's up to you, this board.
I personally think it'd be a good idea to review it, or at least say how often we're going to review it. Because otherwise you get the thing, you can't sell cars on Sundays, right? You get these policies that they maybe don't make sense anymore, or they don't keep up with the new technology needs, or, there was no cyberbullying rules 20 years ago.
And sometimes that's what did happen was, now they're changing the bullying law in the state, because ours, we have an anti-bullying, that we've changed a couple of times through the process, but then we had to include harassment, hazing, and some of those other things too in it. So some are gonna be subject to, whoops, we better get on this one, and cyberbullying and some of those, and then some of them are, high school league and different things like that, so it's hard for a question to come to the board, and then all of a sudden we say, yeah, we need to review that policy, superintendent, and then there's 2 or 3 related to it, so all of a sudden we have a workshop, and then we go through some of them. That's kind of the way it's been done.
I want to share a couple things. One is that the last time when we did this major update, the attorneys found out a few of our policies weren't in compliance with the law. And that means we're negligent because we're actually stating we're going to do something that's against the law. And that's because we did not go through our policies. When we ask administration, whoever presents at a board session, they need to review, whether it's a resolution or contract, to review any relevant policies to make sure they can tell the board, yeah, this thing, the policy's updated, consistent with this. That's an automatic way of just keeping it fresh. But the board should make I think, should make a commitment to saying, every so many years, we'll go through all our policies. Within a 5-year period, we'll do it. And then that way, we have to discipline ourselves and just march it down. So if we have a light agenda on one meeting, we say, let's tackle a few policies.
So we have 100 policies, we cut that into 5 years, we're looking at 20 policies a year. I think that's a manageable amount.
And that's one of the primary responsibilities of a school board, because that's the way you speak. You say what you want, or what you don't want is through policy.
And this is also one way that we can affect change.
Right.
Choose your words carefully, make sure that they reflect the current needs, and we plow through these policies.
Well, right now, we have a policy that we still need to review. The school, it's related to school board officers. The election of school board officers, what reads here is different what it should be. So it is important that we review those often.
Okay,
we have to go.
yep, let's,
Let's review.
I'm fine putting a 5-year number on it. So we turn them over every 5 years. So we've seen all of them and reviewed them. Does that sound makeable? Does that sound doable?
that's right.
Isn't that too big of a chunk? 5 years, isn't that too long? I mean, considering that things are changing so quickly lately.
Would be a minimum, it'd be, or as needed, so a minimum of every 5 years, we will look at each goal,
Or as
or each
needed.
policy, or as needed.
Or as needed. Yeah.
Minimums do oftentimes become maximum, so. So if you tell your kid you have to read for 10 minutes a night, they're gonna read for 10 minutes. Tell them you have to read for 20, they'll read for 20. You know, if we say we're gonna review this every 5 years, we'll probably review them every 5 years.
Unless we need to,
Yeah,
like,
unless
if
we
they're out of
needed to.
compliance, like
Yeah.
what Superintendent was just talking about. We have
So-
to change something because they're out of compliance and they're illegal, so.
Actually,
we look at every goal every year.
But like, there's this one that Nellie's talking about that I have no idea, and so it could sit there for 5 years, and I'll be gone, before we get to it, right? And so, yeah, I'm thinking, 3 or 4 is probably, I mean, because most of them are gonna be easy, some of the policies are 4 sentences. And if we said, within your term, you should have reviewed all of the policies at least once, so if we said every 4 years, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, our current policy number 208, our current policy number 208, formulation of policies, says the primary responsibility of the school board is to establish policy for strict goal operation. The administrative staff shall review existing school policies, rules, and regulations and recommend revisions to the school board. Develop policies and regulations initiated by. And then it goes on to talk about how we read it for the first meeting and then the second meeting. But there is no time, or there is no structure on when these should be reviewed, other than administrative
When was that last review?
input.
When,
That was revised
There's a date on the top.
January 28th, 2008.
It's not reviewed,
And we will be reviewing policies on Monday at the study session.
Yes, we will.
208 will be one of those policies that will be up for review.
Well, David, do you have any recommendations on that when it comes to time?
Well, understand also, the district does subscribe to the MSBA policy revision, so they do that too on a lot of the major policies you have. So when the statutes change, they have reviews that they go through, and they present model policies for you. So those will come up sort of automatically. You still have to adopt them, but I know in the past we had all sorts of policies with odd numbers, and no one could ever find where they were, and the administration's done a really good job of organizing them, so now I can find them. But it wouldn't hurt to, I kind of like the 5-year period to go through all the policies, go through a cycle. I'll agree with you that some of the policies are simple, short, but the regulations aren't. And it's not so easy to go through those policies. It takes a lot of time on the administration's part and others to go through those, so I understand your point too, that you could be gone before the policy comes around. Anyone could be, but I think you have to get a comfort level with the people who are doing the reviews and see how much work they're doing and what they can fit in.
So let me just ask, if there's 120 a year, is that a doable number? Or is that,
It depends. Chris is going to be bringing forward a policy for discussion with the board on transfers.
Yes, correct.
That may take some time to process. So 20, all depends. I'll be with the board, right?
well, we agree it's easy. Something on transfers, I'm sure we might have some disagreement on, we'll have to require some discussion.
And not to belabor the point, but a policy statement is a simple 1 to 2 sentence statement. But then there's a list of regulations that administration has to take care of that goes into about 5, 6, 7, 8 pages. You remember what the boundary discussion we had was lots of regulations that we talked about there too. And that's where we get hung up. The policy is simple enough, it's the regulations, where there's a lot of discussion, a lot of input from the public, a lot of input on this, on a variety of ones. I would almost favor a 4-year.
but most times, we only deal with the policy, like with transfers, we may get into more in depth, but most times, it's just the policy that we deal with, so.
Yeah.
Yes, Les.
It's just like a rule. All these things, a goal can be changed. So later on, once you get into it, you may want to adjust. But I think right now, 5 years is a good timeline for you.
That would be 20 a year, right?
Right.
But I thought you were saying that would be a little ambitious to say 20 a year.
I kind of like challenges.
But he's not saying we want to take on 25 a year and go to 4, is he?
I think it's worth mentioning also that when you look at timeframes, realistically, this goal only has 2 years. So there's a,
Yes.
we're going to be together theoretically just 2 years. There's another election coming in 2 years. And so how much,
In a year, actually.
yeah, for those that are keeping track, it is next year, isn't it? So, I mean, we just have 2 years to work together as this team. So, and I don't think we want to do 50 a year, just to say we did it.
So is everybody okay with we leave it 5 and then we can adjust it if we find out we get through a lot? Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we can't do them faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And it can be changed by next year's board.
Okay.
Well, you know, and the other, I guess the other question would be, do we do a overview review of, do we agree with this policy versus a in-depth review of, does it meet all the requirements of every statute, right? So that, there's, you know, there's two different ways that we could look at it, right?
Mhm.
Because we could probably go through all 100 in 2 months, just reading them and saying, do I like what this says or do I not, right? But it's gonna be all of the underlying stuff that's gonna really get it, so.
So you're saying this is just light reading for you
Well-
on the weekends?
I've read them before, and it didn't take, but I didn't read every underlying statute to make sure that every word in there,
I read them as well,
wasn't, yeah.
yeah, and it was
You need something to do at night, right?
interesting.
Plus, he's only been here since, what, 7 this morning? You need something when you get home. And we need more cookies.
Well, I don't think, yeah, there's one there. Okay, so now we're moving on to community engagement, which is the third sort of bucket on our list here. And as you would imagine, there were quite a lot of comments here. Plan and work with the city, neighboring school districts, county health agencies for common student concerns or issues. The goal for that was to set parameters for community and family engagement programs that are reflective of the needs of all families in the school district. Let's see, implement programs around family and community engagement, working with the Office of Educational Equity, oversee the implementation of the family engagement programs and provide feedback based on quarterly reports provided by the administration, determine measurement and evaluation guidelines that identify effectiveness of parent engagement programs in relation to student success, provide meaningful opportunities for community engagement that reflect commitment to our constituents. And I think I'll just pause there for any, if anyone has any comments on the first ones that I read. Yes, Superintendent.
I'm not, some board members may remember this, but Rick Kaufman and the board worked together to come up with a community engagement plan, and that plan is still in place. I suggest that the board review and update the community engagement plan and recommit to that plan.
Yeah, that was part of our board priorities last year. That was one of the things that started happening right after we discussed those board priorities and board goals, and it was a parent engagement program.
But this is for community engagement, and it's gonna fit right into the work that Chris is talking about. There's all these engagement meetings and advisory committee meetings. So that plan needs to be updated for all the things that Chris is gonna lead. I'm talking about the plan that was approved before by the school board.
Yep.
Is there an amount of time where we could say, you know, we're getting a report, like the last report that we got was a year ago? Are we getting a new report coming up sometime soon?
On which topic?
The parent engagement program?
I think that's gonna be part of the integration plan.
I mean, but the program that has been, you know, the
Right.
whole thing that has been done so far, it would be nice to know what was
Sure.
done and how it worked and what,
All right.
to have a report on what has been done. I don't know how often we should have those kind of reports, or do we just assume they're coming?
I'll get back to the board on that. So you want to get an update on the family engagement plan?
Yeah?
You may, I haven't read the plan fully, but it may already be addressed in the plan.
Yeah, but that's the new plan, but what I mean is, what has been done so that we can have that kind of information as.
It may be addressed in here. I'll see what's covered. I don't know. Okay? I'll get back to the board.
Did I hear you correctly say that you wanted us to review that policy on that was worked on before?
The policy.
With
No, the family engagement.
family
plan.
engagement or something? What did you say?
It was a community engagement plan for the school board.
Okay,
It was a plan designed for the school board.
okay. And review that, you said?
And review that
Okay.
with Rick.
Okay.
And see if you like that and how it needs to be updated because of the World's Best Workforce
Okay.
Advisory Committee work and all the engagements.
So maybe when we review that with Rick, we could also talk about what's going on,
Right.
since that was the plan.
Yes, good
Kind of
idea.
to what you were asking for.
Kind of neat how they all fit together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any
So-
other?
So, if I saw this in like a broad perspective, it might be, like, what's the overall goal? Increase community engagement and in ways other than just through what we're doing with the world's best workforce? I mean, is that, like, I'm reading some of the things that you have on here, I mean, is that, because we're gonna have the world's best workforce thing, but I can understand that might not be the only way that we're going to want to interact with the
Right,
community.
exactly. I mean, in general, what is our community engagement plan? Or what is the goal for community engagement? Since this is so much, something that the board really needs to do. I mean, this isn't new, it doesn't just come new with the world's best workforce. We
Right,
always
yeah.
had a parent community engagement, so when I say, set parameters for community and family engagement, like, what is it that we want to do, or what is it that we want to accomplish with parent engagement? What are the parameters that we want to see happening in the district when all those programs are implemented that have to do with community or parent engagement involvement? I think we need to be more specific about what the role here is, or what we would like to accomplish or see happening. And then they develop the plans, of course.
So is that, what he's writing up there, is that sort of rabbit?
Yeah, well, it's basically what I wrote, because it's, what's there, it says review and update, but that's one of the things that we're gonna do as part of it, but, are we gonna set the parameters, like Don said before, then do we get to talk about what it is that we want to see coming out of the advisory committee, or who the people that are gonna be part of it are gonna be? So what are the parameters? Are we gonna set those parameters, or we're not, or we're gonna just stay away from it?
Are you talking about defining what we mean by community engagement?
Yeah, maybe that's a good way of putting it,
Yes,
what do we,
Superintendent.
what do we want to accomplish?
Can I take a stab at this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you just, you're talking about that up there, the community engagement plan, but are you also talking about what we talked about earlier, kind of what the board's role is in these forums and these community engagement now? Is that more where you're going? What's
Yeah,
our
I'm
role
looking
now?
at a very broad perspective, not only focus on world's best workforce, because that's just one plan,
Mhm.
but in general, what is it that we want to see, or what we want to do with community engagement?
I was trying to understand what you're.
Community and family, let's call it
Okay.
family engagement. And community, and family includes parents and kids
And grandparents,
and grandparents.
and aunts and uncles, and, yeah.
Right. Seconds. So,
So is that sufficient then? That is, that says, update, review and update. But are we going to set parameters? I think that's what you're asking,
Well, do we want it to be part of our goals, to be able to set parameters?
Yeah.
Do we want it to be able
Is that what your intention was?
Yeah,
with the goal?
do we want this to be part of our goals, that the school board is going to set parameters, which we pretty much do, right? We already set the parameters, it's just not established anywhere, it doesn't say it anywhere. And then, of course, the administration carries out that, and they're the ones that develop the whole
Are
thing.
you talking about parameters for the world's best workforce?
No, for community
community
engagement. Let's forget about the
Okay,
world's
I was-
WW being for a little bit, and let's just focus on community and family engagement as it is, even if this thing wasn't in the middle of.
So like, what's an example of a parameter? You want,
How do we want to do community engagement? How do we want to do community engagement?
let's see, a year ago, we would have never thought of a pancake breakfast. I mean, I think that they're kind of spontaneous events.
Exactly, yeah.
So to set parameters for something like
Well,
that
it
would
is
be.
like that. I mean, how do we set parameters? Do we want to set these parameters? Do we want to say, this is what the board wants to do? We want to have a pancake breakfast, for example.
Yeah, but what if we want to have a, flapjack dinner? Is that gonna?
Well,
be-
it's just that we're already doing that community engagement, but it's not read anywhere as it is part of the board. Like, if you notice, in other school districts, they're very specific about what the job is with community and family engagement.
Mhm.
It's even in their strategic plan. So,
It's in a strategic plan.
So this,
yeah, it's
this
part of
is,
their,
if I'm hearing what you're
their
saying,
mission.
this is in addition to what the community engagement plan is. This would be more specifically tailored to the
Just
the
the
board.
broader.
So we could, for instance, we could say we'd like to have 3 board sponsored social gatherings.
Well, yeah, well,
And-
this is the what, but then the house come after that, right? Isn't that what we learned that day?
Mm-hmm.
This would be the what, and then the house come after that, and the house don't have to be established in this. Those just come along as somebody, happens to think about something great, like the pancake breakfast, or based on that, the administration can come and say, based on this that you want us to accomplish, then we have developed this other program, or we're thinking this would be a good idea. We're gonna work with the community. Now, what the parameters are gonna be, we don't know that, because we're not there yet.
Sure.
This is like the broader idea is, are we gonna set parameters? Then if that's the case, then when things like advisory committee come, then we can say, this is what we wanna see coming out of this advisory committee, just like Don was asking before, So we're gonna be the ones that are gonna, decide whether or no this is the kind of committee, I don't know.
Okay.
I wanna say it
I thought, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about what the board would do, the board
That's what I
itself
thought,
for community engagement, as opposed to what the district is doing with their community engagement plan. Because the district wouldn't tell us how to have a pancake breakfast or a spaghetti dinner, that kind of thing.
Right, well,
We can do that.
again, yeah, I mean, when we set parameters for community and family engagement, that would include everything, the kind of activities that we do with the community or for the community, and the kind of programs that they will develop based on what the board wants to accomplish, independently of, program A or program B that is required by the legislation.
Okay,
Chair?
yeah.
We have community engagement people working in the schools that know what their school, what their community needs. I think for us to tell them, to be specific about what they need, I don't think that's not what we should be doing.
Well, I think it is, because this is, the school board has a direct connection with the community. That's our direct connection. It's different from all the other things that we see happening that the administration develops. It's a direct connection. Even the statute said that, right?
Well,
So when I say, I'm not saying we're gonna do the job that they're gonna do. That's not what I'm saying. They're already developing their programs. What I am saying is, we want to establish some parameters where we say, listen, we would like to see this happening with the community, or can you help us accomplish this specific goal?
Maybe what I think in terms of parameters might be for us to decide what we wanted to get out of the community engagement ourselves. And so, you know, a school might say, well, you know, they might have their PTA, and PTA would say, well, we want to figure out what parents at our school want at our school, and we're going to do something for our school. So maybe what we would do is say, what are the things that we want to know from the community? Do we want to know? Do we want to have more direct input about the experience at the football stadium? Do we want to know more about the food choices, you know? Are the kids eating the food? Would your kids eat different food? Do we want to just become more engaged and more accessible to the community, so we have a pancake breakfast? And so, like, those might be bigger headings where we'd say, you know, some of the things we want to know, like, we already have the curriculum advisory committee, so we might not necessarily say we want to know about curriculum, because we could call that committee. But I think that might be more of the path that we would go down as the board, is saying, what are we hoping to get out of community engagement? Is it just do it just to do it, or you know, are we trying to find a way where we can get more involved with strategic partners? We have a lot of our friends in the district. Do we want to, as a board, become more involved with them, or them more involved with us, or make those partnerships, or maybe just deciding? And I think that's where reviewing the community engagement plan that we have, but have our own board engagement plan to say, there's certain things that we want to know outside of this world's best workforce.
And remember this, those are boards for, goals for the board, right? Those are goals that are supposed to be for the board. So when I say, yeah, establish parameters, it might also be, okay, we would like to see this happening within our school community. For example, we would like to see more parent involvement, okay? That could be something like that. And then they are developing the programs for that already. But then also, when you set those parameters, then you also say things like, at the end of you know, in order to know if the goal is being accomplished or if it's working, then you also have some sort of an evaluation process where you say, yeah, it did work. You know, we are connecting this to student success, for example. So, yeah, we would like to see this coming out of the community, the family involvement, the family engagement, so that we can see if it's connected with student success. I just think it's more like ownership, you know, developing that sense of ownership. It's already there. I don't know if it's that the word parameters is just kind of too scary, but it's already there. What I'm saying is, do we, the board, need to, you know, go ahead and say, we are responsible for this, you know?
Well, maybe we'll find that when we review it with Rick. Yes, we have hands over
You know,
there.
one of the things that we've done, of course, is establish the family engagement thing at all the schools, you know, and that was good. A lot of us were at the Saturday session at Kennedy, you know, that works out good, all the individual schools. I see the community engagement as working with the churches or communities of faith, and city, Creekside, with doing something bigger. Our partners, many partners that we have, you know, that's all community engagement too, you know, so there's some of that that's going on, and that's to maintain the separation between our going out hosting town hall meetings or doing something like that, saying, hey, anybody interested, come on and listen to us. We've tried that in the past, you know, we can continue to try some of those again, but that's where we can do it. We always do some partnering with some communities of faith, you know, and that's part of the community too, because there's a lot of senior citizens that volunteer in the schools too. So that community engagement aspect, but then the family engagement one is the one that deals with all of the families and our schools and curriculum and all that other happy stuff that goes on there in the families and schools.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between family engagement and the school engagement.
Families
and
are part of the community. Yeah, the programs are different in the approach, it's different. Like I said before, you know, maybe the word is too scary, but the board is already doing it. They are doing all the job already, which, you know, it's a great work that you're doing. And not saying it's not, or I'm not saying we need to change it. What I'm saying is, do we want to have it there to say, this is our commitment to the community, you know?
Okay.
This
It's,
is something simple, it's not,
Don's arm's falling
I'd
asleep.
like to suggest, because I'd like to move this on, I would like to suggest, if you look at what was put up there about community engagement, if you have some other suggested language, we can talk about it, and then I would say that we have this broader discussion when we actually review the plan. Since we're supposed to review the plan, maybe that's where we have some discussion about some of the goals? Is that?
Sure.
yeah, we can continue the conversation later on.
I
as
just want to
things
say one
develop.
thing. I'm pretty sure that we have a success measure regarding family engagement. Don't we?
Yes, we do.
I thought so. So we do get a report back on family engagement.
That's what is important to see the report, because we haven't seen the report in a year. That's what I'm saying. We haven't seen the report in
But
that year,
there's
because there's no parameters for that.
But they're scheduled, they have a schedule of when they report the success measure.
Exactly, but it's been a year, Marie. It's been a year for something that the board requested a year ago, and that includes budget. So isn't that part of parameters? We're gonna see this happening, you know, or we're gonna see a report coming to the board every, you know, or twice a year at least?
Well, this is obviously a,
It's a different conversation.
yeah,
We don't
it's
need to get stuck.
another conversation.
Okay.
So let's, it doesn't mean it's not important, it doesn't mean that we're not interested, but,
Did you look at that up there, what we have up there though for now?
Yeah, and I said I'm okay with that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dick, I just wanted to
that's okay?
finish the thought while we were on it.
So, right now, when you're following along on your notes here, I'm at, hold public forums, which is the middle of the community engagement page. Host community events. Engage in collaborative efforts with the city in order to improve community development. Meet with city representatives to discuss school and city-related issues and plans. Continued community involvement or outreach events. We made a good start, now let's keep it going. Plan and host community forums that engage our community in the work of educating our students. Expand quality early education in our community to reach out to children who are not being served by our current early childhood programs. Engage parents and the community in ensuring all children are ready to learn. Provide necessary district support to enable the board to hold community meetings, public forums, and then adopt a plan to support and improve teaching and learning that is aligned to the world's best workforce. First part is required by MDE beginning in October 2014. Establish an advisory committee, hold annual public meetings. And then, there's your, that was your 4, and I think this is your number 6, right? Increase transparency by formalizing procedures for responding to public inquiries, requests, complaints, and suggestions by the last meeting in December 2014. One possibility is to post public questions and board administrative responses on the district website.
We don't want to do that.
And I think I'll mark that, and we'll stop there for any dialogue, any comments.
That number 6, I think, is really good. I don't know if we really want to be putting them on the website, but I think we need to formalize how we're responding to public inquiries, especially when emails are sent to the entire board. Instead of, in our current practices, we don't respond and we wait for the administration to respond. I think that we need to have some type of response coming from the board. Kind of my preference. Maybe,
Or at
obviously,
least
we need
tell-
to speak with one voice, so we don't want to have 7 board members giving 7 different answers, but we want to have a voice just to say, maybe from the chair saying, thank you for your email, we'll pass this along, and you'll receive a response shortly. But I mean, just to ignore it, I just really don't like that
I don't know.
process.
Could that, would that look like perhaps a, dare I say, template?
Yeah, well, temp will be fine, because you don't want to speak on behalf of all of us, speaking for the board, I
I
agree.
can't, yeah.
Hey, you don't want to be doing that, but I mean, just an acknowledgement that you got the email and that you appreciate them taking the time to email, and whoever you need to send it to will send this to person, superintendent, and you'll receive a response shortly.
Jim, you,
I was just gonna say, that probably needs to be solidified as to a practice, that way when they send them out to everybody.
Yes.
Sometimes they just send them out to individuals, and then so what typically has happened, then we just forward it on to the superintendent or Deb, and then she in turn, sends it to the proper department or individuals involved with it on administration. You know, sometimes they just wanna do it, but if we respond, like you say, individually to it, then all of a sudden, it's on the email, and then somebody's gonna quote
Well,
it.
it depends on
send
who
it
they're
on.
asking the question. If they're sending an email just to you, then you can answer that. But if they send the email to the entire board, then you shouldn't be answering it.
Right, that's right. But I mean, you typically, then the chair, if
Yeah.
it's sent to everybody, the chair would respond saying, thank you for your email, we're sending it on to the right. Then they'll email
Right.
you back and say, no, I don't wanna hear from them, I wanna hear from you guys.
Heck, that's my concern. Yeah, they send an email to us, and why is the administration responding to it? They're not asking the administration, so.
Yeah, Superintendent?
I agree it's needed. We'll come up with a protocol, a written protocol of how we handle things, different situations. We'll draft something up for the board for review.
Be great.
Okay.
You know, and I know that there's a way that we do it, but it's not, as to my knowledge, posted anywhere.
Right.
So if people went on our website and
Sure.
it said, if you send this message, you know, you can expect a response in
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
less than 30 days, and
Thank you.
in 3 to 6 months, you will get a response,
That'd be a good response,
but
yeah.
only if you supplied your postal address.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think it's not always clear who's gotten the email when it comes.
And then we
The whole
should
board get it.
formalize for ourselves, if someone sends something to us, who do we send it to? I usually forward it either to Les or Deb or both.
Yep.
But if someone sends us a question ourselves, should we automatically forward it to everybody?
Yeah, you know, when you forward it to everybody, you run in the risk of everybody answering, and then we get into some legal trouble, and David
Not
could
if we
explain
have
that.
a policy that says that we won't, right? So if we just say, if you receive a complaint from a community member or a question or whatever, it should automatically, and usually with the district's response, we all get the answer, but you might not know for 4 or 5 days if the question is out there until they respond, right? So do we wanna put together something where we say, when we forward it on to administration, we also forward it on to that school board address, so everybody just gets it? Do we wanna do that?
Yeah.
Sure.
We just need to make sure that we remember that we don't respond, because then we get into
Yeah.
the whole,
Yeah, I mean,
the
what
meeting law.
I've done is I've responded to the person saying, thank you for contacting me, I'm forwarding on your email to whoever I'm forwarding it on to, and they will get back to you shortly. But if we just had almost like a form letter, I mean, that's what happens when you send something to the president or whoever.
Yeah, it's not a
Yeah,
reply.
they just send
Yeah.
something back, says, yeah, to just acknowledge we received this, and then sometimes you get another response later, and sometimes you don't, but.
That would handle if it goes sent out to all of us, but so you saying that if we individuals get an email, we should also forward those to everybody else?
That's the question, I don't,
Then it comes into the individual's,
Yeah,
you know,
if that person
they're
doesn't
feeling
feel
they want-
comfortable
yeah.
sharing with everybody. You know, what I've done in the past is when I get a question, what I do is I will ask the administrator, who I believe will have an answer, and then after they have an answer, then they share it with the rest of the board. That's what has
but
happened
someone
before.
could be emailing an individual board member with the problem that they're having with the administration. So, you know, if we had a protocol where we're forwarding all of these emails to the administration, then we've just, betrayed that, trust
Yeah,
that
exactly.
individuals is emailed with, us with.
Yeah,
So I don't know about the individual board members getting emails, how we,
We can't do anything about it. They're the only ones who can do it. The administration's the only ones who can resolve the problem. You know what I mean? As an individual board member, what are you gonna do?
I don't know, I'm just trying to think of a problem that could occur with us sending all of our emails that we get from people to everybody.
You don't want
Because it might just be for me, or someone might just send you an email and not to everybody.
That's a
Hey,
judgment call, I think.
Well, we have to have that in the protocol then.
yeah, because there's people that
That's why it's hard to
sometimes
make a
say,
protocol for it, because
Right.
a lot of judgment comes into it.
some people would tell you, please share with the rest of the board.
Yeah.
And some people choose not to do that, and there might be a reason why some people don't do it.
Now,
They're comfortable.
is our email actually public? Because I know if someone sent in a request for Information Act request, we would have to supply it, right? So.
Our
is it-
private email address?
No, our school board.
Yeah,
email.
Yeah.
that's public.
Right, so if someone sent us a email, technically, it's public information anyways.
Yeah. They have to be.
Or not.
They have to be
Check with-
specific in their
We
request.
check with David.
It is, you can't write a letter to a public official and expect it to be private, so the same thing applies to email. The only thing I can see, besides the thing that Tom's bringing up, is I suppose you could have a member of the public sending the same email individually to each of you, and you each could be giving different answers.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see what your opinion is.
I think maybe when we're setting the parameters, as Rick said, you put on, the website or whatever, if you email, along with the emails, if you email these, this is when you'll get answered or whatever, maybe we should put right on there. If you email these to these school board things, they're shared amongst the school board, and put it out there for the public to know it. And then that might cut down on the ones that they would just email you that they only want for your eyes. So that they understand they're public, because maybe people don't understand that they are public, could be public information as someone requested. Maybe that's something people should know.
I think individual, we run the risk of getting into some
Virtually everything,
trouble if we
everything
start
that was
answering.
discussed
Yeah.
has happened at one time or another and led to all kinds of
I know the temptation is to want to answer them
implications and
and to sort of fix their problem. But if I answer, I haven't spoken to all of you.
Right.
Yeah.
We speak
I'm not
together.
talking about answer them individually. I'm talking about just because you said they're public, maybe we should make the public aware that they are public. That's what I'm saying.
And so.
Because they might not know that right now.
Yeah, so in my scenario, say someone did send one to each one of us, my response would just be, thank you for, something to the effect of, thank you for emailing me your comment, question, concern, whatever it is. I've shared your concerns with the other board members and with the appropriate members of the administration.
Mhm.
Should be hearing.
That's it, yeah, you don't give any
And I might even
opinions
have
or.
to say to
Yeah.
them anything else. And so then they might get that same response 7 times, but it's,
I think what you could do is we could just put on there that the protocol is that he responds to them for the board, and then he sends out the same type of thing. I mean, he doesn't respond as personal, he just sends what you said, so they wouldn't get 7.
Sure.
We could just put that on there.
and, and there are some things where, if there's 7
And how do we
opinions,
know if
I
we
don't
want to
have,
do
there might be some things where I don't have a problem with, if someone asks you, what do you think about this? Because that's, if you sent a letter to Ann Lancheski, I've sent them to her before, and she sends back with what she thinks, or Paul Rosenthal, I sent him letters, and he wrote back to me telling me what he thinks about a specific issue, and I may still agree or not agree,
But they're not one member of a board.
right, yeah, and so how is it different, and am I asking this honestly, I don't know, how is it different with us?
Well,
Because you said there's a difference if you're
if
part of the board.
if somebody sends a question to me and they see me as a board member, and I respond, well, this is what you should do, this is what I think. I think it's natural for them to assume that that's a consensus.
Well, unless you stipulate, or if you say, speaking for myself, not speaking for the entire board, I mean, can we not do that? No, can we give our own opinion?
You can try, but I'll lean on Jim's experience on the board. I know that he's seen just the most naive replies. You think you're just helping, and somebody takes that, they print it out, and they run down to the church or to Cub or to Byerly's or wherever, and they say, look, the board said this, and now what do we do? And all you're trying to do is help, or all I'm trying to do is help. And so it's I think you run a real risk of getting into trouble where you weren't looking for it, where you were just trying to fix whatever it was. If they're asking a question, what do you think about no recess when the wind chill is 10 degrees or below,
Yep.
minus 10 or more? And if you answer that question, now somebody runs around and says, listen, we got the board consensus. Now, wait a minute, all I did was answer your question. Well, no, you're on the board and you speak for the board and I gotcha. I'm not saying that people are gonna do that every time, but That's the risk that you run.
And incidentally, I'd like to see what Ann and Paul said to you, so please forward them.
They said don't listen to Jim, I'm sure.
But yeah, and so then I guess that would be the question. I mean, if someone asks me, you know, what do you think about all-day kindergarten? What do you think about pre-education? What do you think about having graduation on June 10th? I mean, would you look at them and say, thank you for your, for your question? You know, there's gotta be something that you can, you know, some
It's-
things that you can talk about.
It's a little different conversation when it's when it's face-to-face,
Call them up,
face-to-face.
call them up and say, I'll call you, let's talk,
Yeah.
let's meet and talk about it.
Just real quickly, and then we can move off of this one. I had a 38-minute, 14-second conversation with a member of the public today who sounded as though they wanted me to fix a problem, and I told them very early on in the conversation I was unable to do so. And I listened to them, I learned, I found the right place to send them, and I redirected them. But I think it helped that somebody listened for 38 minutes and 13 seconds. They got nothing but a great big giant ear. So,
Well, the superintendent said that they will come up with a protocol.
Sure.
You know what has worked before.
okay, so let's see, we are picking up,
Talk about the rest of those that we just went over? Is
yes,
that what we're doing now?
yeah, we got to 6 and then I stopped,
Okay.
and then I'll read the rest down to resource plans.
Well, can we go back to this the one that was expand quality early education in our community and reach out to those that are not being served by our community?
Yes,
What do we, I think that needs to be explicitly written into the plan, something to that effect, that we need more reach out and more, outreach to get more people into our early childhood program.
I don't disagree. I think we could have a good conversation with Tom Holton, Kay Miller.
Not only into our early childhood programs, but the truth is I believe if we're going to do anything to ever close any achievement gap, we need to be, not only in our early childhood programs, but we need to be saying to, whether it's the child care provider or it's grandma watching them or whoever, saying, these are the things that your child needs to do to be ready for kindergarten. If we're going to have them ready, we can't just have them just only be people that we serve in the existing programs. We need to figure out a way to get to every
Every child.
kid before kindergarten.
And I believe that Tom Holton has taken that step.
Yep.
And he's got a CD that he sends to all the home child care and so that step's already been,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if he can expand it anymore, but
Yeah.
you know he's done that.
Yeah, I know that I was concerned when I heard, when we saw all-day kindergarten come across our desk, that people might lose sight of our early childhood programs. And I have been assured over and over that not only have we not lost sight, but that we're stepping up our efforts, so.
Well, I asked a little bit about it from some of our early childhood people, and I guess to summarize, I was kind of told they're still trying to figure out how we reach all those people. So I guess that should kind of be a ongoing thing, I guess, but it still falls under Ready for K, so.
Yeah, there's some, I'm sure, David, there's some legal aspects to contacting homes of people that don't have students in our schools already as well.
No, we contact everybody for screening. They all have to be notified that their child has to be screened, so they all get contacted already. But we're talking about, yeah, I mean, somewhat even what Kay did when she was here and presented the other night.
Yeah.
That church had her come and talk to a group about early childhood and what Jim's talking about into the faith community and stuff, and being able to send more of our early childhood people there to say, this is what a quality early childhood looks like.
Sure.
So that we're spreading, we have great early childhood people, spread our knowledge to the community.
Share our expectations, yeah.
And just our knowledge of saying this is what great early childhood looks like.
I think we also need to, there's a lot of kids that we're missing that are of age, 2, 3 years old, that have no idea about our our programs here.
Yep.
So we're missing a lot of kids, so
We are.
I think I don't want to speak for Don, but I think when you wrote this goal that you want to specifically meet those kids, reach out to those kids and get them into the program, because, when I'm sure as all of you, when you were out campaigning, whenever I saw little kids, I'd ask the parent, are you in
What's-
ECFD, do you have preschool? And they
There
have
you go.
no idea what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
it was.
And I found that all too common in our community, that people are unaware of our programs.
It
So
kind
I
of,
think we need to have a specific goal about reaching out to more kids.
If I may just interject, I don't think that's due to lack of effort, but it's finding how we do that, and I think that's what
Right.
I'm reading into
Yeah,
your
yeah.
comment.
Well, the
You
how
have
isn't
to
us,
do-
we're the
yeah,
what.
It doesn't have to
It's
do
the
with
what.
effort, it's
They
that,
have to do the how.
community changes, things change.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's just part of it.
and I think part of the whole thought is generated after we saw the letters about the Preschool Plus program and that whole parent ed piece and how valuable that is, and I thought, but that serves just a few people.
Right.
Not only do we want to continue good programs like that, but we want to serve way more people
More people.
in that type of parent education. Or who's ever taking care of them, doesn't have to be the parent, it could be grandma, it could be
The
my neighbor,
caregiver, yeah.
whatever,
Yeah, we want to serve all.
so.
Insert all here. Yes.
I added
Superintendent.
the third bullet item there, establish an annual board legislative platform. Is that something the board wants as a goal?
Legislative platform?
Are we accepting a synonym for platform as position?
Yes.
So the board will establish a position on that year's legislation?
For the upcoming legislative session. Like adequate funding would be an example.
Sure.
So to bring up all the issues that were in the legislature, and then we take board votes on every issue, as some other school districts do.
That could be an approach, yes.
I think you can just add adequate funding onto that one, just as permanent.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that tie into our days at the Capitol and/or like our previous Saturday session, or another Saturday session? I mean,
It could, as part of your
so I
action
mean, I
plan.
guess the platform,
That's what it could look like.
the word platform is
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, because some of us went to the school board's legislative day. They have a different platform than what school administrators might have, et cetera, so trying to figure out what platform we would actually be approving would be, I don't know, a little bit of an issue, I guess.
Yeah, because even within MSBA, there were some things that we didn't necessarily have to. Okay.
Or board
I think
slash-
even, I think it would help if we have another conversation with the legislative, representative senators. Having a position, or at least be knowledgeable about what we want them to do would be helpful for them.
Could maybe establish an annual board/legislature session, and then have platforms, issues, and so forth like that is underneath it?
I think that would be an action plan, if you want that,
As opposed to,
because we have one now.
Well, I think we'd have to specify who's making the decision. Is it
Right.
the legislative committee? Are they the ones making the decision on this?
Right.
Or is it
And
the
that's,
school board as a whole?
right,
Yeah, well,
I mean, that's kind of why we didn't want to, when we did the legislative committee, we didn't want to take positions, because
exactly.
unless we get from the whole board, who are we to speak for them?
Well, yeah, and then the other thing is that part of the job of the legislative committee is that then you educate yourself around those things. So it doesn't mean that everybody's gonna educate themselves around those bills and, what's going on. And then, is everybody gonna put into that kind of effort so that you can actually make a very informative decision,
Well,
an accurate one?
the legislative committee could report to us
those that
before
aren't.
and say, here's the legislation, and since you've kind of done the homework, you could say, here's what we think we should do with it. And you'd be hopefully well-informed, and then we could take that and, do our own homework as well. But, I think if we looked at the legislative committee as an advisory committee to the rest of us, it could work.
But then we don't have to put it exactly as establish a platform, because things might change as we report and get together and discuss, and maybe end up saying, yeah, we're going to, we're gonna oppose this, or we're gonna favor this.
Yeah, that's the big problem, because if we have a meeting on Monday and we all vote if we're for or against this, I mean, these bills are going through legislature, they're changing hourly, daily, so we
Exactly.
might be
wouldn't-
against it Monday, but then on Wednesday we're for it, but we would have to have another public meeting, because we can't just,
Yeah.
call people up, say, well, you want to change your position on this? No, we'd have to
Yeah.
'Cause
have
our
another
meeting
meeting
has
to have
to be
another vote,
I mean,
so, it just
committee
becomes almost
pretty-
impossible.
The committee pretty much depends on what's going on, like you said, every single hour it changes. And like last week, we have to make big decisions, no, and we kept working together with Les, with the administration, with Deb, because things kept changing, even the night before.
But to keep on changing the slide, because every day it was something different.
Exactly.
I
We
might,
wouldn't necessarily have to take a position for or against something that doesn't exist yet, but we could have an opinion as far as, like the Health Insurance Transparency Act. We would know what the general concept is, and our position could be, here's what our concerns are, here's what we would support, here's what we don't think we would support. So then when those legislators get here and they say, well, we wanna know what you think about this, we wouldn't say, no, we hate it, and they're like, yeah, but we just made new wording this morning, what do you think of that? We could say, well, here's the basic concept that you're trying to get at, here's where we would agree, here's where we disagree, and so it could be a more generalized statement, versus a specific,
I agree with that. It should be very general, adequate funding. Another thing that we know that comes up is QComp. Legislators were asking, how do you guys feel about QComp? We should already have taken the position. We love it. It's the best thing out. Whatever it takes, we support QComp. That would have been a great message to give. So that kind of real global kinds of things, I think would help us.
I know that Senator Wickland referred to current language, and that caught my ear, and we could amend our comments to just say, based on the current language, we like the direction it's going, or we don't like the direction it's going. We understand that it's a fluid process and it'll change until the last day.
But
When-
then you end up
when would we
making
make
a
that decision?
Anyway.
But-
Go ahead.
So when we make that decision, because if, like I said, if we have the legislative forum on Saturday, so we meet on a Wednesday, we make the decision that we don't like this current language, well, if it changes between then and the meeting, then our position would also change.
And they
But-
may not have a chance to talk to, but if
We
we
can't,
establish
it's
a
not that we,
their
it's
position.
not that we just can't talk, it's a public meeting. The legislative committee also has to be a public meeting.
Mhm.
So we can't host a public meeting in time to make a change.
Yeah, that's where the problem comes in.
Problem.
But if this goal, establish an annual legislative, maybe there's a different word than platform, but we want to have an annual legislative think session or something like that.
Discussion, maybe?
well,
I don't know.
and like what the superintendent said, if we say as part of our platform, anything that you make us do, you have to provide adequate funding, it's very easy for them to just say, well, what do you think of this? Well, our platform says it has to be adequately funded. Are you adequately funding this? Then we can do it, right? So there's ways to make it, to make it
Well,
generic enough. Like if you look at the Democratic Party platform or the Republican Party platform, I mean, it's,
well,
lot
last
of-
year we didn't have that kind of issue because we agree on all those things that we had last year pretty much, but whatever provides more funding. But, one of the issues that we encountered this year, specifically with the Health Transparency Act, was that there was confusion in the language, that a lot of people were very confused, and there was a big misunderstanding of what it really was. And so there were different versions among the community, and so.
Let's say there was disagreement on interpretation of what the bill said.
It was the interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So Superintendent, you have a question?
The MSBA, MSD, MASC all put out legislative platforms. I suggest that either the legislative committee or the board review those platforms and see if there's any positions we'd either support or question. Because there are some positions taken by those groups that we may not want to follow, because they could be speaking for outdated issues that have no relevance or may hurt us financially.
But to your question about for the rest of this session, I think we can still continue to have the conversations with them. And I looked up under the MSBA guidelines, it just says that we're to be liaisons to the elected people, and we still can do that. We can still facilitate meetings and still do that as far as, you know, working with follow-up from our other meeting, like the QComp thing.
That's another thing where we have to speak with one voice, you know, just like when we were here Saturday.
If it's too controversial, I put this up, I'll be happy to take it off.
Well, I think it's just difficult. I don't think it's controversial. You know, when I talked to Representative Slocum after the meeting, and she said that she would rather see this as a discussion.
Right.
And to bring the community in, bring the board members in, instead of just the legislators speaking. They want to hear what we think, and it's like, well, it's kind of hard to do, because we have to speak with one voice, so we can't speak as individuals.
They wanted to, what I heard was they really wanted to have the public be able to have more time.
Yeah.
Was the comment I heard afterwards. I don't know if that was all of them, because some of them left early, so.
Maybe that
Some of
calls
them
for
were
some more
multiple-
time.
Some
Yeah.
represent multiple districts too, so they're off with someone else that might get another perspective
Mhm.
than what we naturally want to have.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, as we know that catching them now at the early stages, when they're still in committees, we might have the most influence. Because once it gets out of committee and goes to the floor, well, there's no sense telling them then, because then it goes to the whole broad.
We probably had more influence than we did it before session started.
Yeah.
It should be like, and probably have more like getting legislators here, because they're
Not as
super busy during the legislation. We were fortunate to get all 5 of them here, and
Yeah.
I think what we could put in there is to review the whole legislative day that we did, and review that process and see about changing it for next year with the legislators' input. I would like to hear how they would like to also, kind of, some of the comments, because I didn't hear from all of them. So I think that would be a good thing to do.
Okay. So
So I'm hearing that we're going to need more time next year for whatever this
Yeah,
engagement
we
looks
have
like.
to provide more participation in at least 2 hours.
Okay.
So there's no interest in establishing a legislative platform or position?
Platform is the word that
That is just,
bothers me.
I think
Sounds like
what Don just
commitment.
said, like, you know, review and, you know, how we can change it. Because I think we need to make some changes to it, really, the format. And that really should have some board decision, not just the legislative committee saying, well, we're gonna do this. I mean, we should kind of have, the whole group should have some input to it, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
There shouldn't be any problem, though, Rick putting in there, provide adequate funding. I mean, that could be, we could etch that in stone, couldn't we? Adequate funding plus 2%?
You know, like, if you look at the MSBA one, I mean, it's things like increase current funding levels, so they have a suggestion for that. Authorize local school boards to extend an existing operating referendum on a year-to-year basis, subject to a reverse referendum. You know, and so there's things like that, and they'll put in proposals, provide funding to implement staff evaluation systems. And so, you know, those are things where we could say, well, here's some of the things that we could use, you know, if there's a need in our district, we could say, you know, we need to be able to fund X, Y, Z over here, but the current legislation only allows us to fund A, B, and C over there. So we would like to see, either have an expansion of what we can already do or something new. You know, things like, don't give us mandates if we can't pay for them.
Unfunded mandate?
Yeah.
You know, don't give us mandates where we have to do it, but if we don't have to choose. You know, things like that. So.
Yes, Superintendent.
I think this conversation is great. For example, Tom Holton, he's leading an effort to get more funding for early childhood programs. I think now, and he had that in mind before the session started, to have a conversation with the board about this. The board may say, boy, fine, well, we like it, we'll support that. It's coming from one of our leaders, be really good. That kind of conversation, I think. Maybe the word platform is,
it's a little,
All right, so we worked
And I-
through,
Can
yeah.
this is where there's a fine line between boards and individuals, because we all vote and we all have, you know, relationships with people that we elect. So I don't know how that, how that plays into it, but so if he says, you know, Tom Holden would like funding on this, and it's something I agree with, you know, I'm willing to go there. But that doesn't mean I'm speaking for the board. I do have a life outside of the board, too.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's an important piece of it, so.
How about this word?
Establish an annual legislative plan?
Okay, that's nebulous enough. What do you think?
Nebulous enough, yeah.
Open to interpretation?
I think the conversation would be very healthy to have.
Establish an annual board legislative conversation. There you have it, right there.
Yeah.
I think we just added.
Yeah.
Yep, we're good for until next year.
Well, I think, well, what
Put
does
a
that look
check
like,
mark
though?
behind
We're
that
gonna
one.
have a meeting where we, I mean, I think we need more specifics than that, you know, I think it's still a little vague, establish an annual
I would,
plan, I mean,
what I would say is bringing all the legislative platforms with respective groups that we're members of, anything that any of our cabinet members are advocating, like, I know that Dr. Heisted's advocating for some things. And, yeah, and I testified at one for reading, Audrey Suka, Minnesota Reading Corps. I had supported an effort that they wanted to put forward. So, I thought
Okay,
that,
so-
that kind of conversation may be helpful.
talk to more things what we would be asking the legislators that we want in our district, but
Right.
how did the part where do we take our opinions on what's already going through the legislation?
I think that would be the legislative committee's work, because there's so much action going on, the whole board can't keep up.
Yeah.
And I'd rather work with a smaller group than a bigger group, it's really
Get
hard.
7 people together?
Yeah,
And then I think for this meeting, this plan, this potluck, whatever it turns out to be next year, we need to know maybe a few weeks beforehand, so that you can, whoever the committee is, can inform the board, you know, the way this is going now, we like this, we don't like this. Then we can at least share a partial opinion when the legislators come and say, you know, what do you guys like? What do you think? What do you want us to do?
Well, would that be an opportunity for us as individuals, since we don't have a policy for it, we can be individuals and share our own thoughts, or would that be something we could not do?
right.
Yeah.
So we can give our own thoughts then?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds
Whatever
good.
Tom, I agree with whatever Tom says.
There we go. Two more people say that, we're good.
Say it again, Tom, I just don't know.
He's counting, I like that. Okay, so, now we come to, resource plans. And oddly enough,
We didn't do all of these ones on the one we were just working on, whatever those were.
did
The goal one, isn't that
Oh.
this
We didn't do goal 1.
I finish? Okay, I'm sorry, I finished at
Engagement,
6.
that's it.
communications?
All right, so we're gonna move for you that have a copy of this to goal 1. The school board will improve communication with students, parents, employees, and the community in the district through a variety of options to promote, enhance, and improve the understanding of the mission of the district and to provide a school board visibility within the community by June 2015 as assessed by self-evaluation. Objectives of that stated goal are school board members will attend a minimum of 4 events or meetings at the schools of which they are ambassadors to provide visibility and to listen to any questions or concerns from those schools. School board will have a minimum of 2 community events, example, pancake breakfast, spaghetti dinner, ice cream social, to engage the community in a friendly setting. The school board will explore and discuss the options of including a student school board member from each of the high schools so the students will be more involved and informed of the role of the school board and provide an opportunity for the school board to get a student's perspective. The school board will have a minimum of 1 discussion session with the community where an educational topic will be presented and members from the audience will be given the opportunity to ask questions and engage the school board. And then our last one on there is set parameters for community family engagement programs, implement programs around community family engagement working with the Office of Educational Equity. So does anyone have questions, any responses to those last?
That looks
seems like when we do our family engagement review, that would be, these would be all action items that we could discuss at that.
Yeah,
Well, and,
yeah, there's a lot of overlap.
all right,
in
letter
this.
D, we go back to that same one, we don't need to get into that conversation, but obviously that was part of the conversation that we had with the facilitator, so we got pretty much stuck with the word parameters, but it was there already.
And that, just for those that are listening at home, that's set parameters for community family engagement programs, implement programs around community family engagement working with OEE.
We don't need to go back, right?
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is it's important for board members to get out into their schools? It's-
Well, I think it's important for us to specify the amount of the time, because I mean, like, well, when I talk to parents from other schools, and I'd say, well, who's your school board rep? And they'll say, I don't know, I've never seen a school board member in my school ever. So, I mean, if we're telling school board members that it is your responsibility to go to your schools at least 4 times a year,
Yep.
be it meetings or whatever, then I think that'd be more helpful than the way it is now, because I think there's a lot of schools that don't get touched by anybody. At least previously, we all have a new board, and
Sure.
we're all energetic, and we're all hitting all of our schools, but
I know I've got a PTA meeting to go to tomorrow night.
I have 2 to go to tomorrow night at the same time.
So I'm just trying to paraphrase, what
Yeah.
I'm hearing here is it's important for board members not only to come on Monday nights and study sessions and show up on television and wear fancy clothes, but to get out into the schools, into the communities, let yourself be seen, interact, have conversation.
Well, and it's also important for it to be evaluated. I mean, self-evaluation, of course, but that should be part of our evaluation process, is you ask yourself, well, how many times did I go to my schools? And
I think, can I add to that? It's not just your schools, it's your committees that you're assigned to.
Yep.
yeah,
As a person that was on the Special Education Advisory Committee since 1997, and I rarely ever saw a school board member ever visit, maybe 3 times in all those years.
probably doing what you need.
Yeah, you were the 3 times, Jim.
22 years, 22 years,
I was.
3 times.
Yeah.
Well, I happened to be working at that time, and when I got home, I was coaching kids.
That
You
happened to
weren't the
be,
only one ever on that committee all those years. Come on, that was probably the 4 years you were on it that you
Yeah.
came.
One of the things that we might talk about it when we put together our action plan, but one of my previous employers, the way that they did their review is they would say, and I use it in our example, they'd say, what are some qualities that we think are good in a school board member? And we could say, is engaged with the school that they're an ambassador to, might be one of them. And then what you would do is then you'd say, in your own self-assessment, you'd say, okay, so how did I show that? So instead of necessarily saying, I went 4 times, check, it's, I did this, I talked to the principal about this and that, yeah, I did, and so then in your review, instead of it saying necessarily, I went 4 times, I did this, I did that, and then thinking, well, that's what it said I had to do, so that's what I did, and so I check off my 3 items, because maybe when you went, you weren't meaningfully involved in the situation, you were just there to say, oh, shoot, I gotta do this before, next Tuesday, because that's when I do my review, make sure I get in my 4th time. And so that was helpful for me in that situation, because then it was, okay, so here's a big list of things that we think are good about a person in the position that you're at. Now show us how you did examples of that. And I mean, and they had a list of like 50 things. And you wouldn't do all of them, but you would pick the ones that sort of highlighted what you thought you did well. And so it might be, instead of going to a meeting, it might be just doing school visits. It might be going to, I don't know, opening ceremony of, they just got a new lunchroom, I don't know. Something like that.
so you want to be cognizant of the impact that you have
Right.
when you're there, and not
Demonstrating that
just
you're-
marking time.
Right.
Just demonstrating that you're involved, which is
Yep.
what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and so my point is you might say, well, attend a minimum of 4 events or meetings, right? But, and so if I'm doing just a very objective evaluation, I say, I went 4 times, therefore I give myself an
That would be a huge improvement over what the board has been doing, past practice.
A. But,
I mean, that's my whole point of making the goal, that should be the minimum. If someone wants to do the minimum, then at least they're doing more than they were before. I mean, I'm sure there's
yeah,
former board members
but
that
you
didn't
might,
go to any of theirs.
but you might attend 0 meetings, but you might do 45 other things, right? And so that's why
Can we
I'm saying,
change it from meetings to contact at least 4 times, or
Well, it says
something like
meeting
that?
or event. I
Or
mean, so
event.
if you go to a
like, for instance, there's
carnival, that's an
something,
event.
over Poplar Bridge, you're gonna do a STEM day. Well, it's not gonna be a meeting
That's an
necessarily.
event.
An event.
It says
But my-
meetings or event.
But it might not, but it's not like an event that they're gonna post on the website, like, oh, we're having this event, necessarily. They might not. And it might be, oh, just going to see and observe what's going on.
Right.
It might be,
Well, contact,
just
like what
conversation,
Don said,
you
is
know.
fine, contact.
But
At least
if I,
for contact.
if I might summarize, I'm hearing, I'm actually hearing very well tonight. I cleaned them both out. I understand what you're saying. I don't want to get into a position where you just show up to mark time.
Exactly.
That doesn't, I think people can they understand that and they see that. I don't hear you saying that. I understand what you're saying. We need to get out into the schools.
Well, I just wanted to put a measure in there.
Yep.
A simple measure. I mean, I could have made that objective, 3 times as long. I mean, I agree with everything that Rick said.
well, so
But, I mean,
here's the
that'd be a
example.
long-
Is oftentimes teacher evaluations are things like started class on time,
Excuse me?
ended class on time, was present, and so they give you these quantitative things like, but you could go through a whole checklist of teacher evaluations, and, yeah, you showed up, you have knowledge of the subject, you did this, that, and they're quantitative, but it's other things like inspired students, things like that, was inspiring to their students, students felt valued in their class. Things like that, where you're not gonna necessarily have a measure, so you could do all these things and still be a horrible teacher. But there might be a whole other list of things that you do really well that makes you a really good teacher. You know what I mean? So, yeah, if going 4 times is more than what you did before, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
why don't we outline, say, here's some things that we think would make you a good school board member? Now, how about when we do our self-assessment, now you tell us why you think you are. What are you doing? Because maybe what you're doing doesn't match exactly what we initially prescribed.
Let's let the superintendent chime in here.
If you look up here, what I heard is define expectations for school ambassadorship and other things. This should be, maybe Rick Hoffman, when he presents the community engagement plan for the board, he can help with that, the conversation about what the expectations are for not only ambassadorship, but all the duties as far as community engagement for the board.
Sure. Sure. No, I know that when I go out into the schools, I gravitate towards the things that I really, really enjoy, but that doesn't mean that it's having an impact.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's quantifiable. It doesn't mean, just because I like it doesn't mean that anyone else does.
Well, part of it is to, a visibility. When we're at these meetings to observe and report, we're not necessarily in there to do anything but that. Just a visibility where people see that school board members are at their meetings, even if they don't say anything. I think that's important, that people see their school board members.
Does that also fall under board goals?
What?
To do those things?
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean,
We're under the community engagement part of
goal community
board.
engagement?
yeah.
goals.
Okay, well, we're having, this is good conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we move on to,
Yeah,
Next bucket.
Last one, objective 4, should we specify community engagements about town hall meeting or any one of those types of things? Is that up in there? Where we host a session and hope people show up?
We hope that they will come.
Yeah.
We've held it.
Action plan, update goals,
yeah,
agree spring, summer, agree on series number of event, meet, community event, I don't know, town hall.
Any opinions before I dive in? You know, I like the idea. It's an optimism that I share, but it's,
I mean, every once in a while, we would have, and we even co-hosted with the city on occasion.
yeah, I was out at the Mall of America when you,
And in the past, and we've had a couple of city council people and a couple of school board members, and then we took questions in general. And now the up-and-coming Creekside consideration is under question too. And in the past, we've used our schools, neighborhood schools were open at night. They typically are anyhow for all the sporting events that go on. But we opened up a media room or a community room or something like that where people could go play cards, people could go have game night or something like that, bring the kids in and do homework, you know, so that was another thing, but that was talked about before, so I don't know. It's just another opportunity for us to get our faces or our thoughts out in public.
what types of, yes, Superintendent?
I think this conversation should be postponed or held when Rick is here, when he presents the community engagement plan. I think we can go into it and seek his guidance.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I was just about to ask what kind of topic are we gonna pick, and that's, we can get into that conversation.
Mhm.
We haven't even got to.
Okay, the next bucket that I had put on here was resource plans, but my shoehorn didn't fit anything into that one.
Well, that's why there's no.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that there wasn't any interest for this, but my brain at that particular part of the day when I was cutting and pasting just didn't see anything fit in there. And then so if anyone has anything that they think would fit better into a category called resource plans, you know, we'll discuss that, we'll move it, cut and paste it, otherwise we can move on to superintendent goals.
So are we gonna have another session with Teamworks before we get to the end of this?
Of which, I'm sorry?
Yeah, are we gonna have another session with Teamworks to discuss all those goals that we came here with before we approve anything? I mean, wouldn't it be helpful?
I don't know, do we need to?
You know, the first time that we met with them, I thought we were coming for that reason, to have this kind of conversation, because we were supposed to come with our goals too. You know, it was very focused on world's best workforce, but
I would
Is-
suggest that right now, we just get through this, get this done, see what it looks like, and see if we can get to them ourselves before we go out and have them come back. Because if we can reach them ourselves, I'd rather do that than have somebody else come in again. I don't know.
Yes,
I don't want to
Superintendent.
spend the money. That's me.
I don't like to spend money too, but I personally would
No, I
like,
said I don't want to spend the money.
no, yeah, I don't like to spend money too, but in this case, I think a lot of progress has been made. You distill down, about at least 12 pages of goals down to, we probably just have one page here. I think it's a really good start. I think having a pro like Dennis to come in and review this thing and sharpen these things up and align it up would really help me and help Chris. And then the goals for the superintendent, he can help line it all up, make sure that, and we're all in alignment. And that's so important for us right now. We made tremendous progress here. Would really help us deliver the message out to the staff and show how everything fits together. So it may take a couple weeks to do, but I think it'd be time well spent.
Any other opinions?
And I guess I'm kind of in favor of that too. We've been working here almost 3.5, 4 hours. 3.5, whatever that math is. I mean, it's so, some of us are getting a little
I don't know, I'm catching my second wind.
Are you? Lucky.
Our audience left.
Don't I look like it?
You don't have to vote to extend the meeting in 45 minutes.
If I may, Chair, I concur with the superintendent. As you go through this work, you've started some things with teamworks. I need to tell you, the administrative team, and in the 2 years I've been here, have been working with the educational leadership system. Your success measures are based on that. Your strategic plan is based on this. And so the more alignment we can create, when you align the adults in the system, the more power and opportunity, the more potential you're going to create. So I agree with Director Corman. If we had some time to work with TeamWorks, I think the alignment of systems really starts pulling things together. So then you have set your goals. Obviously, administration will take some of those and make some of this start coming to life. We'll have success measures. We'll be measuring and reporting back. And some of what you were asking for, Director Corman, earlier, are monitoring reports, which are part of the educational leadership system. When will we hear back to know how these programs are working? It's part of that system. So the organization and alignment of TeamWorks, I think, can be incredibly beneficial and move us forward quickly as you establish it. So my position would be, I'd strongly encourage the board to do that.
Just a quick question for point of reference. The initial quote from TeamWorks, if I'm remembering, that was for the one session. Are we looking, I don't know, is it appropriate to say that we're looking at the same cost, less, more?
I think so, yes, about $1,000.
Okay. Just so that we understand what it is we're.
And then we'll have another retreat then.
Yeah.
Kind of-
I don't have a problem with that after we get this work done, but I didn't want to just, quit here and then have them,
Yeah,
I think we need to get through this, get this done,
yeah,
Well,
we can get through this document tonight.
maybe.
I mean,
Would,
I'm pretty sure we have one
I
bucket
think we're
left.
done.
We're almost done.
I think we're done.
would we all,
We haven't done any superintendents.
would all of this information that we've had, Dick's package, go to Chris or whoever, Christine or Dennis, and then maybe add a couple words, wordsmith and do some of that stuff?
I think he's gonna come, I wouldn't, he should look at this thing, come in, and meet with us as a team.
Talk more.
But
Right,
after
have
we
a
see the other integration plan and have the community report, all of that,
Yes.
before we do that. Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, because we want to make sure that the language we're using in those goals, whatever we're going to approve, it's correct.
Right.
But those are realistic goals, or
Right, exactly.
appropriate words.
And the reason why I suggest we're finished is because the board needs to first establish these goals, then the superintendent goals follow. I'd rather work on this thing with Dennis, the board's goals, agree upon that, and then we move next to the superintendent goals, and then everybody else's goals follows.
I agree.
Or else we're just gonna be spending another 2 hours here talking about something that he may say, well, this first part's not right.
Yeah.
We built it on the first part, and
Yeah, those connected, yeah.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, what are we thinking?
So stopping after board goals and put the superintendent
I've
goals
captured,
on hold for a while?
yes, I've captured it all up there, what I heard tonight, and I can send this thing off to everyone, and including this.
Okay? And then we'll pick a time that's suitable to get together. We thinking a Saturday morning?
Or we just do another third Monday?
Yep.
This one,
Well, do we want to wait,
Yeah, I guess it
His
depends on his
waiting
availability,
His
and then,
availability,
Yeah.
right.
yeah. All right, so let's,
Third Monday sounds better.
yeah, third Monday's easier for me.
could I lean on you to contact Dennis?
I'll organize the session.
Okay,
Funny Dinah School Board.
all right, and we're all good with that?
yeah.
All right, just before we wrap up, a lot of conversation tonight. I think it went really well. This is the first time in my tenure on the board that we've gotten this far with this conversation. So this is my elated, happy, excited face. So, anyone have anything else that they want to add before we,
before we close with a prayer?
Call
What
it.
do we have under the, can you scroll down so I can see the community engagement? Oh, there's the rest of it.
You know, that conversation would be good to have with Dennis as well, the setting parameters, because obviously it was part of what we had added during the goals and discussed that day with him.
All right, thank you to absolutely everybody for hanging in there, and folks at home, it's time to go to bed. Call this to a close.
Back to the family.